Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I found the photograph tucked inside a cookbook I'd inherited from my aunt. A Polaroid faded at the edges, showing a woman's hands arranging flowers in a vase. The fingernails were painted deep red, chipped at the tips. Behind the hands, barely visible through a kitchen window, stood a man in a dark coat. He wasn't supposed to be there. My aunt had lived alone for 30 years, never mentioned a husband, never spoke of visitors. Yet here was proof that someone had been watching her, close enough to appear in her private moments. The timestamp showed it was taken just weeks before she died. I started going through her belongings more carefully after that. The house felt different now, like it was holding secrets in every corner. In her bedroom dresser, I found more photographs, always the same angle, always through windows. Kitchen window, bathroom window, bedroom window. Someone had been documenting her daily routine for months. The police file was thicker than I expected. 3 neighbors had called in suspicious activity over the past year. A man lurking near the property line, strange noises coming from the basement, cars parked across the street with engines running. But every time officers arrived, they found nothing unusual. My aunt always insisted she felt perfectly safe. Her journal entries told a different story. She wrote about feeling watched, about finding her garden tools moved overnight, about discovering footprints in the soft earth beneath her windows. But she also wrote about her friendly neighbor who helped with yard work, who brought her soup when she was sick, who had a key to check on her when she traveled. I realized I'd never met this neighbor. At the funeral, no one mentioned him. When I asked about him at the local grocery store, people looked confused. The house next door had been empty for 2 years, they said. The previous owner moved away after his wife disappeared. That evening, I walked the property line between the houses. The fence was low enough to step over easily. In the overgrown garden next door, I found them. Dozens of cigarette butts, all the same brand, scattered around what would have been the perfect vantage point to watch my aunt's kitchen window. The basement key was exactly where she'd written it would be, hidden under a loose brick near the back door. The steps creaked as I descended, and the air smelled like damp earth and something else, something sweet and cloying that made my stomach turn. She'd been keeping a garden down there, potted plants arranged in neat rows under grow lights, each one labeled with a date. The dates went back 5 years. In the corner sat a wooden chair, worn smooth on the arms, positioned to face the small basement window that looked out at ground level. On the workbench, I found the camera, a telephoto lens attachment, rolls of developed film, and a notebook filled with times and observations. Her routine mapped out in meticulous detail. When she showered, when she cooked, when she went to bed, but the handwriting wasn't hers. The final entry was dated the day she died. Subject appears agitated, keeps looking toward basement window, may have discovered observation post, recommend immediate relocation of materials. I sat in that chair, looking up through the window at ground level, and realized what I was seeing. The angle matched perfectly with the photographs. Someone had been sitting here, watching her, documenting her life. But my aunt's journal suggested she trusted this person, even gave him a key. The hospital records showed she died of natural causes, heart failure in her sleep. But the neighbor I'd asked about, the one who supposedly moved away, had the same last name as the signature on the observation notebook, the same last name as mine. I found the missing person report filed 2 towns over. His wife had vanished 3 years ago, last seen working in their garden. The photograph attached to the report showed her hands arranging flowers, deep red nail polish chipped at the tips. In my aunt's bedroom, I noticed something I'd missed before. The window latch was broken, forced from the outside. Fresh scratches in the metal, recent enough that they hadn't rusted yet. On the windowsill, pressed into the dust, was a clear handprint. The fingers were long, the nails had left small gouges in the wood. I locked the house that night and drove to the police station. But sitting in the parking lot, I realized what I was about to report, that my family member might have been involved in someone's disappearance, that the person who'd been watching my aunt might have been protecting her, or might have been the one she needed protection from. The weight of the evidence felt overwhelming, but the truth felt impossibly distant. Every answer led to 3 more questions. Every piece of proof could be interpreted 2 different ways. I never filed the report. Instead, I sold the house without going back inside. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, or if I was just protecting myself from learning something I wasn't ready to know. The new owners haven't called with any complaints, but then again, maybe they haven't found the basement key yet. The photographs are still in my possession, locked in a safe deposit box. I tell myself I'm keeping them as evidence, but evidence of what, I'm no longer sure. Crime 2, I still remember the smell that hit me when I first walked into that house, something metallic mixed with old wood and something else I couldn't place then. The family had called me to handle the estate after their grandmother passed. Simple enough work, they said, just inventory everything and prepare it for sale. The house felt heavier than it should have, not physically, but in that way spaces feel when they've absorbed too much silence. I moved through room after room, cataloging furniture and personal effects, making notes on my clipboard. Everything seemed normal until I reached the basement. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step announcing my descent into the musty darkness below. I flicked on the overhead bulb and surveyed the typical basement clutter, old Christmas decorations, boxes of photographs, furniture covered in dust sheets. But something caught my attention immediately, a section of the concrete floor that looked different, newer. The cement there had a slightly different color, and when I knelt down and ran my hand across it, the texture felt rougher. I called the family to ask about recent repairs. The grandson, who seemed to handle most practical matters, paused before answering. He said his grandmother had mentioned water damage from a pipe leak, but that was all he knew. His voice carried something I recognized from years of interviewing people, that careful tone people use when they're not lying but aren't telling the whole truth either. I decided to dig deeper into the property records. The house had been in the family for decades, but I noticed several small insurance claims over the past few years. Nothing major, just enough to establish a pattern of minor damages and repairs. But the timing struck me as odd. Most of the claims happened during winter, when the grandmother would have been alone in the house for long stretches. The next week I returned to continue the inventory. This time I brought a small sledgehammer, officially to check for structural issues with the foundation. I told myself I was being thorough, but something deeper drove my curiosity. That patch of concrete bothered me in ways I couldn't articulate. When I struck the newer section, the sound was wrong. Instead of the solid thunk of concrete hitting earth, there was a hollow echo. I struck again, harder this time, and a piece broke away. Underneath, the ground had been disturbed recently. The soil was dark and had that particular density that comes from being repeatedly packed down. I should have stopped there, should have called someone official, made it their problem. Instead, I found myself returning to that house again and again, each time with different tools, different excuses. I told the family I needed more time to properly assess the property value. They seemed relieved not to deal with it themselves. During one of these visits, I discovered the letters. They were hidden in a shoebox at the back of the grandmother's bedroom closet, underneath layers of old blankets. The handwriting was shaky but determined, and as I read through them, a picture began to emerge that made my hands tremble. The letters were addressed to various officials, police, social services, even the local newspaper. In them, the grandmother described suspicious activities in her neighborhood, people coming and going at odd hours, sounds from houses that should have been empty, cars parked in places they didn't belong. But what struck me most was the increasing desperation in her tone as the letters progressed. She wrote about feeling watched, about phone calls where no one spoke, about the sense that someone was trying to silence her. The final letter, dated just weeks before her death, was the most disturbing. In it, she wrote about discovering something that connected several disappearances in the area over the past decade. She mentioned having proof, physical evidence that she'd hidden somewhere safe. The letter ended abruptly, as if she'd been interrupted while writing. I cross-referenced the dates in her letters with local missing person reports. The correlations were impossible to ignore. Every disappearance she'd mentioned in her correspondence had indeed happened, and in each case, the investigation had gone cold within months. That's when I realized someone else had been in the house recently. Small things were different, papers reshuffled, drawers not quite closed the way I'd left them. Someone was looking for the same evidence the grandmother had mentioned in her final letter. I started sleeping in my car across the street, watching the house after dark. On the third night, I saw a figure moving through the rooms with a flashlight. They knew the layout well, moving confidently through the space without bumping into furniture or hesitating at doorways. The next morning, I confronted the family again. This time, I noticed details I'd missed before, the way the grandson avoided eye contact when discussing his grandmother's final weeks, how the daughter-in-law changed the subject whenever I mentioned the basement repairs. Their grief seemed genuine, but underneath it was something else. Relief, maybe, or fear. I found the evidence eventually, hidden inside a hollowed-out book in the grandmother's bedroom. Photographs, documents, recordings made on an old cassette player. The images showed things that made sense of all those insurance claims, all those midnight visits, all those careful repairs to the basement floor. But when I tried to take this evidence to the authorities, I discovered something that stopped me cold. The police report on the grandmother's death had been filed by the same officer mentioned in her letters, one of the people she'd been trying to report for suspicious behavior. I sit here now, months later, with that evidence still in my possession. The house sold quickly to a cash buyer who demolished it within weeks of closing. The family moved away without leaving forwarding addresses. The missing person cases remain cold. Sometimes I drive past where that house used to stand. There's new construction there now, a small apartment building that fills the lot completely. But I remember that basement, that patch of newer concrete, and what might still be underneath it all. The weight of what I know sits heavily in my chest. I've written this account and hidden copies in places I hope are safe, because I've learned that some truths are too dangerous to speak aloud, and some silences are maintained through methods that would chill anyone who discovered them. The grandmother tried to break that silence. She paid for it with her life, and now I understand why her family was so eager to sell, so quick to move on, so relieved when someone else took responsibility for cataloging what she left behind. I still have nightmares about that basement, Not about what I found there, but about what I might have missed, and about the people who made sure I'd never get another chance to look. Crime 3, I found the photograph tucked inside a cookbook I'd inherited from my aunt. The edges were yellowed, the surface slightly sticky from years pressed between pages about casseroles and holiday desserts. In the image, a woman sat at a kitchen table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She wore a floral dress I recognized. It hung in my aunt's closet until the day she died, but the woman in the photograph wasn't my aunt. The face was rounder, younger, with dark hair pulled back in a style that belonged to decades past. I turned the photograph over. Someone had written in careful cursive, "The real one, 1987, nothing more." My fingers traced the words, feeling the slight indentations the pen had left in the paper. My aunt had lived alone for 30 years. Never married, no children, just me visiting every few months with groceries and conversation. She'd been predictable in her routines, comforting in her consistency. Yet here was evidence of someone else, someone who had sat at her table, worn her clothes, existed in her space. I called a neighbor who'd lived next door for decades. Her voice carried that careful politeness reserved for uncomfortable topics when I described the photograph. "Your aunt was always private," she said after a long pause. "But there was a time back in the late 80s when I'd see someone else around the house, a younger woman. I assumed she was family, maybe a niece from out of state. They looked similar from a distance." I pressed for details. The neighbor's voice grew quieter, more hesitant. "It was strange, though. One day I saw your aunt working in the garden, and the next day I saw the same person, or thought I did, but something was different. The way she moved, maybe, the clothes she chose. I mentioned it to my husband, but he said I was imagining things." After the call, I sat staring at the photograph. The woman's smile seemed forced, her eyes holding something I couldn't identify. Fear, resignation. I noticed her hands. The nails were bitten down to the quick, unlike my aunt's always perfect manicure. I drove to my aunt's house, now empty and waiting to be sold. The spare key still hung on its hidden hook behind the porch light. Inside, everything smelled of lavender and old books, exactly as I remembered. But walking through the rooms with the photograph in my hand, I began noticing things I'd overlooked during years of casual visits. In the bathroom medicine cabinet, I found 2 toothbrushes, both worn, 2 different brands of shampoo, one nearly empty, the other barely used. In the bedroom closet, clothes in 2 distinct sizes hung side by side. Some dresses were clearly my aunt's, I'd seen her wear them. Others were smaller, in colors she never chose, styles from an earlier era. The kitchen drawer yielded the most disturbing discovery, a second set of identification documents. Driver's license, social security card, even a library card, all bearing my aunt's name and address, but featuring the face from the photograph. The birth date was different by 15 years. I called the number on the library card. The librarian's voice brightened when I mentioned my aunt's name. "Oh yes, she was a regular for years, such a sweet woman. I always wondered why she looked so different sometimes, younger, more nervous. I thought maybe she was ill, you know how that can change a person. But she kept checking out the same types of books, psychology texts, legal guides, books about starting over." The books, I rushed back to the house and examined the volumes on my aunt's shelves more carefully. Between the romance novels and gardening guides, I found titles that didn't match her interests. Disappearing Without a Trace, Legal Name Changes Simplified, When Someone You Love Has Been Missing. The borrowing stamps inside showed they'd been checked out repeatedly throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. In the basement, behind boxes of Christmas decorations, I discovered a suitcase I'd never seen before. Inside were clothes that matched those in the photograph, a wallet containing cash and more false identification, and a letter addressed to no one, written in the same careful script as the note on the photograph's back. The letter spoke of gratitude, of safety, of a debt that could never be repaid. It mentioned the arrangements we discussed and when the time comes for me to leave. The handwriting grew shakier toward the end. I know what people will think, but you gave me a life when mine was taken away. If anyone asks questions after I'm gone, tell them I was family. In every way that matters, I was. I sat on the basement floor, surrounded by evidence of a life I'd never known existed. My aunt, the woman I'd visited monthly for years, had been harboring someone, protecting them, helping them disappear. The woman in the photograph had lived in this house, eaten at that kitchen table, slept in the guest room I'd never been invited to see. But where was she now? The last date on any of the documents was from 5 years ago. My aunt had died alone, according to the paramedics who found her. There'd been no mention of anyone else, no other belongings claimed, no additional funeral arrangements requested. I searched through every box, every drawer, every possible hiding place. Nothing explained what had happened to the woman in the photograph. The trail simply ended, as if she'd vanished as completely as she'd apparently needed to when she first arrived. The house sold 2 months later. I kept the photograph, though I'm not sure why. Sometimes I catch myself studying that forced smile, those bitten nails, wondering if I'd passed her on the street without recognizing her, wondering if my aunt's kindness had saved a life or enabled something darker. The neighbor mentioned seeing my aunt working in the garden just days before she died. She'd been planting roses along the back fence in soil that looked freshly turned. I drove by last week. The new owners had torn up the garden, complained about roots that went deeper than seemed natural for such young plants. I still have the photograph. Sometimes, in certain light, the woman's smile looks less forced and more knowing, as if she understood something I'm only beginning to grasp. My aunt took her secrets with her, but left just enough evidence to ensure they wouldn't stay buried forever. The truth is, I'm not sure I want to dig any deeper. Some disappearances are meant to stay that way. Some kindnesses are too dangerous to fully understand. But I keep thinking about those roses and the way my aunt's hands always smelled of earth in her final years, and whether love sometimes requires us to become accomplices to mysteries we're better off not solving. Crime 4, the smell hit me first, sweet, cloying vanilla mixed with something else I couldn't identify. It clung to the air in my new apartment like a perfume someone had sprayed too liberally. I'd been living here for 3 weeks, but that scent never faded. It was strongest near the bedroom wall, the one I shared with my neighbor. I knocked once softly, no answer. The building manager had mentioned the previous tenant moved out suddenly, leaving most of her belongings behind. That explained the furniture that came with the place, a floral couch, mismatched chairs, and a coffee table with ring stains that looked like they'd been there for years. The vanilla smell grew stronger when I opened the windows. That's when I noticed the silence, not the peaceful kind, the heavy, oppressive kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. My neighbor's apartment was always quiet. No television, no footsteps, no running water. Just that persistent scent seeping through the walls. I found the first letter while cleaning out the kitchen drawers. It was tucked behind the utensil organizer, folded small and yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. She knows about the garden. We can't let her keep digging. My hands trembled as I read it again. The paper felt soft, worn, like it had been handled many times. I searched the other drawers, finding nothing but the usual detritus of previous tenants, rubber bands, expired coupons, a single key that didn't fit any lock I could find. The building manager was evasive when I asked about the previous tenant. She'd lived here for 15 years, he said, kept to herself mostly, paid rent on time, never caused trouble. Then one morning she was gone, left everything behind, including a month's rent paid in advance. I started noticing things, the way the floorboards creaked in a specific pattern when I walked near the shared wall, how the bathroom mirror reflected a sliver of the neighbor's window, always dark, the fact that mail kept arriving for someone who supposedly didn't live there anymore. The letters piled up on the mailbox floor, bills, advertisements, subscription renewals, all addressed to a woman whose name I now knew but had never seen. I gathered them up, telling myself I was being helpful, but really I was looking for clues. The second letter I found wedged between the refrigerator and the wall. This one was different, newer paper, different handwriting, shakier. The smell is getting worse. I can't sleep. Every night I hear her moving around, but she's supposed to be gone. I pressed my ear to the wall that night. At first, nothing. Then so faint I almost missed it, a sound like something being dragged across the floor. Slow, deliberate movements. I held my breath and listened harder. The sound stopped. The building manager avoided my calls for a week. When I finally cornered him in the lobby, his face went pale when I mentioned the letters. He claimed he'd never seen them before, but his hands shook as he took them from me, said he'd look into it. I started keeping a journal, every strange smell, every unexplained sound, every letter I found. There were more hidden in books, taped under drawer bottoms, slipped between cushions. They told a story I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. The woman who lived here before me had been writing to herself, or someone had been writing to her. The letters spoke of suspicions, of things buried and hidden, of a neighbor who watched from her window and knew too much. The dates were scattered, some recent, others going back years. I found the garden behind the building by accident. A small patch of earth between the dumpsters and the fence, overgrown with weeds. Someone had been digging there recently. The soil was loose, darker than the surrounding ground, and there was that smell again, vanilla, but underneath it, something earthier, more organic. The building manager found me there, hands dirty, pulling weeds. His face was grim. He didn't ask what I was doing. Instead, he helped me to my feet and walked me back inside without saying a word. That night I found the final letter. It was on my kitchen counter, though I was certain it hadn't been there before. The handwriting was familiar now, but the words made my stomach clench. She's in the walls. She's been watching. She knows what I did to the garden. I packed that night, threw everything into boxes, ignoring the lease agreement, ignoring the deposit I'd lose. The building manager didn't try to stop me when I left the keys on his desk. He just nodded, like he'd been expecting it. Driving away, I saw her in my rearview mirror, a woman standing at the window of my old apartment, watching me leave. But that was impossible. The apartment was supposed to be empty. I'd turned in my keys, unless she'd been there all along, waiting behind those walls, breathing in that vanilla-scented air. I never went back to find out if the woman in the window was real, or if the letters were just the desperate imaginings of someone who lived too long in that building's suffocating silence. Some truths are too heavy to carry, and some mysteries are better left buried in the dark soil of overgrown gardens. The smell followed me home, though, vanilla and earth and something else I still can't name. It lingers in my new apartment, fainter now but persistent. Sometimes I catch myself writing letters I don't remember starting, in handwriting that looks almost like mine but not quite, and sometimes, late at night, I think I hear digging outside my window. But I don't look. I've learned that some things are meant to stay hidden, even from ourselves. Crime 5, I found the photograph wedged between the pages of a book I'd never seen before. It was sitting on my kitchen counter when I came home from work, spine cracked, edges worn smooth. The picture showed a woman's hand wearing a ring I recognized, the same silver band with the tiny scratched heart that had been missing from the evidence box for months. I work at the records department. Files cross my desk every day, case numbers bleeding into one another until they become background noise. But this one had stayed with me. A woman found in her apartment, no signs of forced entry, no obvious motive. The investigating officers had filed it under suspicious circumstances, but the case went cold before anyone could call it what it really was. The ring had been mentioned in the initial report, personal effects they'd called it. But when I'd gone through the evidence inventory last week preparing files for storage, the ring wasn't there. I'd assumed it was an oversight, a misplaced item in a system that dealt with hundreds of cases. Now here it was, photographed and placed where I couldn't miss it. I turned the book over, no library markings, no price stickers. The pages smelled like cigarettes and something else, something medicinal, like the disinfectant they use in hospitals. Inside the front cover, someone had written in pencil. She knew. The handwriting was familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. The next morning, I pulled the case file again. The woman's name was redacted in my copy, but I remembered her face from the crime scene photos. She'd been found sitting in her chair, hands folded in her lap like she'd been waiting for someone. The apartment was neat, too neat. No dust on surfaces that should have been dusty, no clutter in spaces where people actually lived. I called the lead detective. He'd retired 2 years ago, but his voice still carried that weight cops develop after decades of asking questions nobody wants to answer. When I mentioned the case, he was quiet for a long moment. "That one bothered me," he said finally. Something about the scene felt staged, not the body that was real enough, but everything else. Like someone had cleaned up after themselves, made it look like natural causes. "What about the ring?" Another pause. "What ring?" I read him the inventory number from the file. He told me to hold on, and I heard papers rustling in the background. When he came back, his voice had changed. That ring was logged into evidence. I remember because it was the only thing of value she had on her. But according to this, it was released to next of kin 3 days after the body was found. Who was the next of kin? A brother signed for it personally. The woman had no siblings. I'd read her file thoroughly enough to know that. She'd been estranged from her family for years, had listed an elderly neighbor as her emergency contact. Someone had forged those papers, walked into the evidence room with the right signatures and case numbers, and taken the one thing that might have connected her to whoever had been in that apartment. I drove to her old building that evening. The landlord was new, didn't know anything about the previous tenant, but the neighbor, the one listed as her emergency contact, was still there. She invited me in, offered coffee from a pot that had been sitting too long. She was scared the last few weeks, the neighbor said, stirring sugar into her cup with shaking hands. Kept asking if I'd seen anyone hanging around the building. Said she felt like someone was watching her. Did she mention anyone specific? The woman's eyes darted to the window. There was someone, a man who claimed to be her brother, came by asking questions about her, said he was worried. But she told me once that her family was all gone, said she was glad to be alone. What did he look like? Professional, wore a suit, carried a briefcase, had kind eyes, the kind that make you want to trust them. She paused, cup halfway to her lips. He asked about you too. The coffee suddenly tasted like metal. About me. Said he knew someone at the records office was looking into his sister's case. Asked if she'd ever mentioned anyone from the department, anyone who might have been helping her with something. I left the coffee unfinished. Outside, the streetlights were flickering on, casting uneven shadows across the pavement. I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about the book that had appeared on my counter, the photograph that shouldn't exist, the signature on release forms that had let someone walk away with evidence. The next day I checked the visitor logs for the records office. Someone had signed in to see me 6 weeks ago, on a day I'd been out sick. The signature was illegible, but the visitor had been there for almost 2 hours. Long enough to access files, make copies, learn which cases I'd been reviewing. I pulled the security footage from that day. The cameras in the hallway showed a man in a suit, carrying a briefcase, walking purposefully toward my office. He kept his head down, knew exactly where the cameras were positioned, but as he turned to leave, he looked up for just a moment. I recognized the face. It was the same man who'd been visiting other cold cases, the one who'd claimed to be a researcher for a private firm. The one who'd been asking questions about unsolved deaths, about evidence that had gone missing, about records clerks who'd been digging too deep into files that were supposed to stay buried. I thought about the woman in the apartment, sitting in her chair with her hands folded, waiting. I thought about the ring that had been photographed but never catalogued, the brother who didn't exist, the man with kind eyes who'd been watching me long before I knew his name. The file is still on my desk. I've read it so many times the pages are soft at the edges, the ink fading from handling, but I haven't filed it away. I can't shake the feeling that she'd been trying to tell someone something, that her death wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a pattern I'm only starting to see. Sometimes I wonder if the photograph was meant as a warning or an invitation. If the book was left there to help me understand what had happened to her, or to show me what might happen to me if I keep looking for answers that someone doesn't want found. The ring is still missing. The man with the briefcase hasn't been back to the office, but I know he's still out there, still watching, still cleaning up after himself. And I'm still here, reading files and asking questions, trying to find the truth in a system that seems designed to bury it. I keep the photograph in my desk drawer now, next to the book that appeared in my kitchen. Every time I open that drawer, I see her hand with the ring that was never really lost, just taken by someone who knew how to make evidence disappear. The woman in the apartment had been waiting for someone. I'm starting to think that someone was me. Crime 6, The Quiet Neighbor. I never paid much attention to the apartment next door until the smell started seeping through the walls. It wasn't something you'd notice right away, just a faint sweetness mixed with something metallic, like old coins left in the rain. The building was old, the kind where sounds and odors traveled freely between units, so I assumed it was just another quirk of city living. The woman who lived there kept to herself. I'd see her in the hallway sometimes, always carrying grocery bags that seemed too heavy for her thin frame. She had this way of looking past you, never quite making eye contact, as if she was perpetually distracted by something more important. Her hands were always clean, almost unnaturally so, with short, precise nails that caught the fluorescent light. The first time I knocked on her door, it was about the noise. Not loud music or television, something else entirely. A rhythmic scraping, like furniture being moved across the floor, but it happened at strange hours. When she answered, she stood in the doorway without opening it fully, her body blocking any view inside. She apologized quietly, promised it wouldn't happen again, and closed the door before I could respond. But the scraping continued. I started paying closer attention after that. She'd leave the building at the same time each day, always carrying a large canvas bag that looked heavy despite her careful way of holding it. She'd return hours later with the same bag, now seemingly lighter, moving with a different kind of urgency. Once I watched from my window as she struggled with the building's front door, the bag slipping from her grip. When it hit the ground, something dark stained the concrete, a liquid that she quickly covered with newspaper before anyone else could see. The maintenance man mentioned her during one of his routine visits to my apartment. He was fixing a leaky faucet and made casual conversation about the tenants. When I brought up my neighbor, his expression shifted. He'd received complaints about a persistent drain blockage in her unit, he said. Every few weeks, the same problem. Hair, he assumed initially, but the texture was wrong. Too coarse, too thick. And there was always that smell emanating from the pipes, something organic that chemical cleaners couldn't eliminate. I found myself listening more carefully to the sounds from next door. The scraping usually started just after midnight and continued in intervals throughout the early morning hours. Sometimes I'd hear water running for extended periods, the old pipes groaning under pressure. Once I heard what sounded like someone crying, soft, muffled sobs that seemed to come from multiple voices. The building's laundry room was in the basement, shared by all tenants. I'd noticed her there before, always using the same machine in the corner, the one that was slightly broken and required you to hold the lid down during the spin cycle. She'd stay with her loads, never leaving them unattended like the rest of us. Her clothes were always dark colors, blacks, deep blues, dark grays. But it was the way she handled them that caught my attention. Carefully, almost reverently, as if each piece required special consideration. One evening I found something she'd left behind. A small notebook had fallen behind the washing machine, wedged between the wall and the appliance. The pages were filled with dates and brief notations in neat handwriting. Most entries were mundane grocery lists, appointment reminders, phone numbers. But scattered throughout were references I couldn't understand. Package delivered safely, location confirmed clean, client satisfied with results. The final entry was different. It contained an address I recognized, a house several blocks away where an elderly man had lived alone. I remembered reading about him in the local community board. He'd gone missing recently, and his family was offering a reward for information. The notation next to his address was simple, task completed. I returned the notebook to where I'd found it, but sleep became impossible. Every sound from next door took on new meaning. The scraping wasn't furniture being moved, it was something else entirely. The smell wasn't cooking or cleaning products, and those voices I'd heard weren't coming from a television. The next morning I called in sick to work and positioned myself by the window. She left at her usual time, carrying the familiar canvas bag. This time I followed. She walked purposefully through residential streets, stopping occasionally to check something on her phone. Her destination was an assisted living facility on the edge of the neighborhood. I watched from across the street as she approached the main entrance, but instead of going inside, she walked around to the service entrance where staff brought in supplies and equipment. An older man in medical scrubs met her there. They spoke briefly, and she handed him an envelope. He disappeared inside and returned carrying a large plastic container, the kind used for medical waste. She placed it carefully in her canvas bag, the weight causing her to adjust her posture, and they parted ways without further conversation. On the walk back, I maintained my distance but noticed something troubling. She made several stops at different locations: another medical facility, a funeral home, a veterinary clinic. At each stop, the same pattern: a brief conversation with someone in uniform, an exchange of money or documents, and her bag becoming progressively heavier. When I finally returned home, she was already back in her apartment. The scraping sounds started immediately, more intense than usual. I pressed my ear against the shared wall and heard something that made my blood cold: the unmistakable sound of something organic being processed, cut, and sorted with mechanical precision. I spent that night researching the businesses she'd visited. The pattern became clear when I cross-referenced their services with recent obituaries and missing person reports in the area. Each facility dealt with human remains in some capacity: medical waste disposal, cremation services, anatomical donations for research. What she was collecting wasn't random. It was systematic, organized, purposeful. The smell in the hallway grew stronger over the following days. Other tenants began complaining to the building manager, but she deflected their concerns with the same quiet politeness she'd always shown. When the manager finally insisted on inspecting her apartment, she agreed readily, almost eagerly. The inspection revealed nothing unusual: a clean, sparsely furnished space with no obvious source for the odor. But I knew what they'd missed. The smell was strongest near the bathroom, where I'd noticed her spending considerable time. The maintenance man's comments about persistent drain blockages suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't disposing of evidence through the plumbing system itself. She was using it as a processing facility, knowing that any remaining traces would be attributed to typical urban infrastructure problems. The notebook I'd found contained more than just addresses and dates. Hidden within seemingly innocent entries were references to specific anatomical requirements, preservation techniques, and client preferences. She wasn't operating randomly. She was fulfilling orders for a clientele that valued discretion above all else. I confronted her on a Tuesday evening when she returned from one of her collection routes. Her response was unnervingly calm. She invited me into her apartment, and for the first time I saw the space she'd kept hidden. The living room appeared normal, but the bathroom had been converted into something resembling a medical laboratory. Stainless steel surfaces, specialized lighting, and equipment I couldn't identify but suspected was designed for procedures that required absolute precision. She explained her work with the same matter-of-fact tone she used for casual hallway conversations. The demand for specialized anatomical materials far exceeded legal supply chains, she said. Medical schools, research facilities, private collectors, and individuals with specific needs all required access to human remains that couldn't be obtained through conventional channels. She simply filled that market gap, ensuring quality and discretion for clients who valued both. The missing elderly man hadn't been her victim, she clarified. He'd been her client. His family would never find him because he'd chosen to disappear, selling his body to medical research while still alive and using the proceeds to fund a new identity elsewhere. She'd simply facilitated the transaction and handled the logistics. But as she spoke, I noticed inconsistencies in her explanation. The timeline didn't align with what I'd observed. The facilities she'd visited weren't equipped for the kind of preservation work she described. And most troubling, the sounds I'd heard through the walls suggested processing that occurred while subjects were still capable of making noise. When I pressed her for more details, her demeanor shifted. The polite mask slipped, revealing something colder underneath. She asked if I was planning to share our conversation with anyone else, and the way she phrased the question made it clear that my answer would determine more than just the end of our discussion. I assured her of my discretion and left her apartment, but I knew our relationship had changed fundamentally. Over the following weeks, I noticed her paying closer attention to my routines. She'd appear in the hallway when I came and went, always with that same polite smile, always asking about my day with just a little too much interest. The scraping sound stopped abruptly. The smell began to fade, but I realized she wasn't ending her activities, she was preparing to relocate them. The canvas bag disappeared, replaced by smaller, more discreet containers. Her collection routes changed, becoming more varied and unpredictable. And then I found the second notebook. This one was hidden more carefully, tucked behind her mailbox in the building's lobby. The entries were more recent, and they included detailed observations about the building's other tenants, our habits, our schedules, our visitors, our vulnerabilities. Each resident had a dedicated section with notes about potential value and ease of access. My section was longer than the others. She documented our conversations, my work schedule, my lack of close family connections, my tendency to keep to myself. The final entry was dated just days earlier. Ideal candidate, minimal risk, high return potential, proceed with standard protocol. I photographed every page before returning the notebook to its hiding place. But when I tried to decide what to do with the information, I realized the complexity of my situation. Her activities weren't random violence, they were business transactions involving willing participants who wanted to disappear, except for the parts that clearly weren't voluntary. The authorities would require evidence that didn't exist. She was too careful, too systematic, too experienced at managing risk. And now that she knew I was aware of her work, reporting her would only accelerate whatever timeline she'd established for dealing with problems like me. Instead, I started documenting everything, every sound, every smell, every visitor, every unusual occurrence. I installed a small camera pointed at the hallway, hoping to capture evidence of her activities, but she seemed to sense the surveillance and adjusted her behavior accordingly. The building manager announced that she'd given notice and would be moving out at the end of the month. Her explanation was simple. She'd found a better apartment in a quieter neighborhood, but I knew she was relocating because I'd become a liability that couldn't be managed through her usual methods. On her final day, she knocked on my door one last time. She brought a bottle of wine as a farewell gift, apologizing for any inconvenience her activities might have caused. We sat in my living room and had what appeared to be a normal conversation about her new neighborhood and my plans for the future. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door and offered some advice. The city was full of people who preyed on others, she said. It was important to be careful about who you trusted, who you let into your life, who you allowed to know too much about your routines and vulnerabilities. Sometimes the greatest danger came from those who seemed most helpful, most concerned about your well-being. She handed me her new address, suggesting we stay in touch. The gesture seemed genuine, almost friendly. But when I looked at the paper later, I realized it wasn't just contact information. It was a reminder that she knew where to find me, no matter where either of us lived. Months have passed since she moved away. The new tenant next door is a graduate student who practices violin at reasonable hours and never causes any disturbances. The building returned to its normal rhythm of urban anonymity and minor inconveniences. But sometimes I catch traces of that same sweetness in the air, just faint enough to make me question whether it's real or memory. And I find myself wondering about the other tenants in other buildings, in other neighborhoods, who might be noticing unusual smells, strange sounds, neighbors who keep irregular hours and maintain unusual levels of privacy. The wine she brought sits unopened in my kitchen cabinet. I've tested it twice for foreign substances, but the results came back clean both times. Still, I can't bring myself to dispose of it, and I definitely won't drink it. It serves as a reminder that some questions are better left unanswered, some neighbors are better left unknown, and some problems are better solved by simply moving somewhere else. Because the truth I can't escape is this: I never reported what I discovered, never shared my suspicions with authorities, never tried to stop her activities or help her potential victims. I chose my own safety over moral obligation, and that choice makes me complicit in whatever happened before, during, and after her residence in my building. Which means the real question isn't whether she was guilty of the crimes I suspected. The question is whether my silence makes me guilty too. Crime 7, the coffee mug was still warm when I found it sitting on my kitchen counter that morning. Steam rising in lazy spirals, the ceramic barely touched by lips that weren't mine. I live alone. I've lived alone for 3 years now, ever since she disappeared. The mug belonged to her collection, hand-painted sunflowers on white porcelain. I hadn't touched it since the police finished their investigation. It sat in the cabinet behind the everyday dishes, gathering dust like everything else from before. Yet here it was, filled with coffee I didn't make, in a kitchen I'd locked the night before. My hands trembled as I lifted it. The coffee was exactly how she used to make it, 2 sugars, no cream. The taste transported me back to morning conversations that ended too abruptly, to questions I should have asked but never did. The police had classified her case as a missing person, though they stopped returning my calls months ago. No body, no crime scene, no leads worth pursuing. I started keeping a journal after that morning with the coffee mug. Small things that didn't belong, a book moved from one shelf to another, a window I was certain I'd closed found open, the smell of her perfume lingering in rooms she'd never entered. Friends suggested grief counseling. The few remaining friends anyway. Most people stop calling when your problems become inconvenient. The breakthrough came when I was organizing her things. In a shoebox beneath winter clothes, I found letters I'd never seen before. Her handwriting, but the words belonged to someone else. Someone frightened, someone asking for help. I can't tell anyone what I know. They're watching the house. They know I saw something that night behind the restaurant. The man in the blue jacket, the one who comes to the neighborhood meetings. He was there when it happened. I have to be careful about who I trust. My stomach dropped. The man in the blue jacket attended every community meeting for years. Everyone knew him, the concerned citizen who always asked thoughtful questions about neighborhood safety. He lived 3 blocks away. His wife baked cookies for the school fundraisers. I read every letter twice, then a 3rd time. She'd been documenting something for weeks before she vanished. Late-night phone calls that made her nervous. Cars parked outside our house that didn't belong to neighbors. A break-in at her office where nothing was stolen but files had been disturbed. The restaurant she mentioned was 2 miles from our house. I drove there on a rainy afternoon when the streets were empty. The building had been demolished 6 months after she disappeared, replaced by a parking lot that never seemed to fill with cars. I asked the convenience store clerk next door if he remembered anything unusual from that period. He avoided eye contact, mumbled something about not paying attention to other people's business. But when I turned to leave, he called out softly that some things are better left buried. His hands shook when he said it. I started watching the man in the blue jacket, not following, that would be stalking, just noticing patterns. He walked his dog past our house every evening, always glancing at the windows. He attended town meetings religiously, asking questions about local crime statistics. He volunteered for the neighborhood watch program. Perfect citizen behavior, except for one detail. In her final letter, she'd written about seeing him dispose of something heavy wrapped in plastic near the river on a night when the weather reports showed clear skies. Yet when I checked his social media from that same date, he'd posted photos of himself at his daughter's school play, timestamp and location verified. Two different places at the same time. Someone was lying. I brought the letters to the detective originally assigned to her case. He'd since retired, moved to a different state, but he agreed to meet me at a diner halfway between our locations. His face changed when he read them. He ordered a second cup of coffee, stirred it for a long time without drinking. There were other cases, he finally said. Women who asked too many questions about things happening in their neighborhoods. Women who noticed patterns. The department told us they were isolated incidents, unrelated disappearances. But the timing was always similar, shortly after they'd made reports about suspicious activities. He handed the letters back to me, wouldn't meet my eyes. His retirement had come suddenly, he mentioned. Full pension, good health insurance, enough to keep quiet about cases that made certain people uncomfortable. I walked out of that diner knowing I was completely alone. The coffee mug appeared again last week. Same placement, same temperature, same taste. This time I didn't drink it. I photographed it, documented everything, then poured it down the sink. But not before I noticed something new, a small piece of paper tucked beneath the saucer. Her handwriting again, but impossible. Just 4 words, "Stop looking for me." The man in the blue jacket doesn't walk past our house anymore. His family moved away suddenly, citing job opportunities in another state. The house sold within a week to cash buyers who never moved in. The windows stay dark. I keep the journal hidden now, buried in a safety deposit box with copies of her letters. Some nights I wake up convinced I hear her voice calling my name from rooms that are supposed to be empty. Some mornings I find evidence that someone has been in the house while I slept, small rearrangements, subtle disturbances that could be explained away as memory lapses or imagination. The police won't reopen her case. There's no new evidence, they say, no concrete proof of foul play. Missing persons become cold cases, become forgotten files, become empty spaces in lives that eventually learn to adapt. But I still taste her coffee every morning when I wake up. I still smell her perfume in rooms she'll never enter again. And I still wonder if she's trying to protect me by staying hidden, or if someone else is trying to drive me insane by keeping her memory alive. The truth sits somewhere between those possibilities, in a space too narrow for comfort and too wide for certainty. I've stopped looking for answers that might not exist. Instead, I listen to the silence she left behind, wondering if it's trying to tell me something I'm not ready to hear. Crime 8, the coffee cup was still warm when I found it on her desk. Steam curled upward in thin wisps, and the lipstick mark on the rim was fresh, the same shade she always wore, but she hadn't been in the office for 3 days. I work as a private investigator, the kind people hire when the police stop returning their calls. Her brother had contacted me after the authorities declared her a voluntary missing person. Adults leave all the time, they said. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, just another woman who decided to disappear. But that coffee cup bothered me. I photographed it from every angle, then lifted it carefully with my sleeve. The liquid inside was still bitter on my tongue when I tasted it, black, no sugar, exactly how she drank it according to her coworkers. Someone had made this coffee recently, someone who knew her habits. The office building felt different after closing hours. My footsteps echoed against polished floors as I walked the halls, noting which lights stayed on, which doors remained unlocked. The security guard nodded at me like he'd seen me before, though I was certain this was my first visit after dark. Her desk drawers told a story of interrupted routine, half-finished reports, appointment calendars with meetings she'd never attend, a small cactus that someone had been watering. The plant's soil was damp, darker than the dusty surfaces around it. I pressed my finger into the earth and felt the moisture seep through my skin. The personnel file painted a picture of reliability, perfect attendance, no disciplinary actions, no complaints from colleagues. She'd worked late the night before her disappearance, according to the building's key card records, but the security footage from that evening had been corrupted, the guard explained with apologetic shrugs. I spoke with her assistant, a nervous young man who kept glancing at the empty desk. He described her as predictable, almost obsessive about her schedules. She arrived at the same time each morning, ate lunch at her desk, never left work unfinished. The day she vanished, he'd prepared her usual reports and left them in her inbox. They remained there untouched, gathering dust. But something in his voice wavered when he mentioned her personal life. She'd been receiving phone calls lately, he said, calls that made her face change. He'd heard her arguing with someone, though he couldn't make out the words through her closed door. The conversations always ended abruptly, followed by long silences. I requested her phone records and found a pattern. Multiple calls from the same number in the weeks before her disappearance, brief conversations that grew longer over time. The number traced back to a man with no connection to her workplace, no apparent reason to contact her. When I called, the line was disconnected. Her apartment complex was the kind where neighbors minded their own business. The building manager let me into her unit after I showed my license. Everything appeared normal at first glance, no signs of struggle, no packed bags, no indication she'd planned to leave. But the details felt wrong. The refrigerator contained fresh groceries, milk that wouldn't expire for another week. Her bed was made with military precision, corners tucked so tightly they could bounce coins. In the bathroom, her toothbrush was bone dry, but a small puddle of water had formed beneath the sink faucet, as if someone had used it recently and failed to turn it off completely. I found her journal wedged between the mattress and box spring, pages filled with increasingly erratic handwriting. The early entries described mundane work frustrations and weekend plans, but the tone shifted dramatically in the final weeks. She wrote about feeling watched, about noticing the same car parked outside her building, about phone calls from someone who claimed to know things about her past. The last entry was dated the day before her disappearance. She'd written about a meeting she'd agreed to attend, someone who promised to explain everything. The location was described only as the place where it all started, with no other details to provide context. I spent hours walking through her neighborhood, showing her photograph to shop owners and residents. Most claimed they'd never seen her, but an elderly woman who ran a corner market remembered selling her cigarettes. This struck me as odd. Everyone I'd interviewed described her as health conscious, someone who jogged regularly and avoided smoking. The woman insisted she'd seen her just yesterday, purchasing a pack of the same brand she'd bought for months. When I pressed for details, she became defensive, claiming I was trying to make her doubt her own memory, but her description of the clothing didn't match what others remembered her wearing. I returned to the office building after hours, using a spare key the cleaning crew had forgotten to collect. The hallways felt different in the darkness, filled with sounds I hadn't noticed during daytime visits. Air conditioning units hummed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a phone rang intermittently before falling silent. Her computer password had been changed recently, according to the IT department. They'd reset it at her request just days before she vanished, though she'd never mentioned having trouble accessing her files. When I finally gained entry to her system, I found her recent work had been deleted. Not just removed, professionally scrubbed, as if someone wanted to ensure no trace remained. But they'd missed something. Buried in her email drafts was an unsent message, addressed to no one in particular. It read like a confession, though the details were vague enough to apply to almost any situation. She wrote about making a mistake years ago, about someone who discovered her secret and demanded payment. The message ended mid-sentence, as if she'd been interrupted while typing. I traced the deleted files through the building's backup system and found fragments of correspondence with several clients. Most appeared routine, but one folder contained communications about a case she'd been investigating privately. Someone had hired her to look into a series of financial irregularities, transactions that didn't appear in official records. The client's name had been redacted from the documents, but the payment schedule was unusual. Large sums transferred monthly, always to different accounts, always in amounts just below the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting. She'd uncovered a pattern of money laundering, documented it meticulously, and prepared to submit her findings. But the report was never filed. According to the timestamps, she'd completed her investigation the same day she received that final mysterious phone call. Someone had offered her a choice, and she'd chosen to disappear rather than expose what she'd discovered. I found myself standing in her empty office again, staring at that coffee cup I'd photographed days earlier. It was gone now, cleared away by the cleaning crew, but I could still see the lipstick stain in my mind, the steam rising from liquid that shouldn't have been warm. The security guard approached me as I prepared to leave, his expression apologetic but firm. He'd been instructed to revoke my access to the building, he explained. The family had requested that the investigation be discontinued. They'd received word that she was safe, living somewhere far away, starting fresh. But when I contacted her brother, he denied making any such request. He'd heard nothing from his sister, received no confirmation of her safety. Someone else had called the building management, someone who knew enough about the family to sound credible. I sat in my car outside the building, watching late workers emerge into the night. The same security guard who'd been so helpful suddenly seemed to avoid eye contact. He'd been working the night she disappeared, had access to her office, could have made that coffee cup appear whenever he needed it to. The pieces formed a picture I didn't want to see. Someone inside the building had helped orchestrate her disappearance, had maintained the illusion that she might still be around, coming and going when no one was watching. But whether she'd left willingly or been forced to disappear remained unclear. Her journal pages haunted me as I drove through empty streets. The handwriting that had grown increasingly frantic, the final entry about meeting someone who promised answers. She discovered something that threatened powerful people, and they'd given her an ultimatum. I never found her. The case remains officially open, though no one seems interested in pursuing it further. Sometimes I wonder if she really did escape, if she's living quietly somewhere under a different name. But that warm coffee cup tells a different story, one where someone wanted me to believe she might still be coming back to work. The truth, I suspect, lies somewhere between hope and fear, in the space where missing people exist before they're declared gone forever. where the weight of what we don't know becomes heavier than what we do. Crime 9. I inherited the house on a Tuesday. The previous owner had died alone, and her estate lawyer handed me the keys with an apologetic smile. The carpet in the living room had a dark stain right in the center, shaped like spilled wine but darker, more persistent. I scrubbed it for hours with every cleaning product I could find, but it only seemed to spread deeper into the fibers. The smell hit me first, metallic, sweet, clinging to the back of my throat. I opened every window, but the odor seemed embedded in the walls themselves. The neighbors watched me from their porches, their expressions unreadable. When I waved, they turned away. I found the journal wedged behind the water heater in the basement. Her handwriting was careful, deliberate. She wrote about hearing footsteps upstairs when she lived alone, about finding her back door unlocked, about the feeling of being watched through her bedroom window. The entries grew more frantic as the months passed. She mentioned a man who came to fix her plumbing, how he lingered too long, how he asked too many questions about her routine. The last entry was different, short, just 4 words, "He's in the house." I called the plumber whose business card was still magneted to her refrigerator. His voice was gravelly, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. He offered to come look at my pipes, said he knew the house well, had worked there many times. When he arrived, his van parked crooked in the driveway. I watched him through the window. He stood on the front step longer than necessary, his hand resting on the door frame like he was remembering something. Inside, he moved through the rooms with too much confidence. He knew where the light switches were, which floorboards creaked, where the bathroom was without asking. His tool bag clinked as he walked, but when I looked closer, I couldn't see any actual tools, just rope, plastic sheeting, and something wrapped in cloth that he quickly covered when he caught me staring. He spent most of his time examining the stain in the living room, knelt down, pressed his palm against it, inhaled deeply. Then he looked up at me with eyes that seemed to hold a secret. "This won't come out," he said. "Some stains are permanent." I asked him about the previous owner, how well he knew her. His smile faltered for just a moment. He said she was a nice lady, very trusting, always left the back door unlocked for him when he came to work, always paid in cash, never asked too many questions. After he left, I found myself checking the locks obsessively. The back door handle felt loose, worn smooth by too many hands. In the medicine cabinet, I discovered prescription bottles with her name, but the dates were all wrong, filled weeks after her death. Someone had been in the house, using her name, her identity. The basement floor had been recently poured, fresh concrete, still slightly damp in one corner. I pressed my ear to it and heard nothing, but the smell was stronger down there. That same metallic sweetness, mixed with lime and something else, something organic, decomposing. I started visiting the local coffee shop where she used to go. The barista remembered her well, said she'd seemed scared in her final weeks, always looking over her shoulder, always asking to sit in the back corner where she could see the door. She'd mentioned a man who wouldn't leave her alone, someone who claimed to be helping her but made her feel trapped. The police report was thin. Natural causes, they said, heart failure. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. But the responding officer's notes mentioned the smell in the house, the unlocked doors, the neighbor's report of a van parked outside for hours before anyone called for help. I found more of his business cards scattered throughout the house, in drawers, tucked between book pages, even one in the freezer. Each card slightly different phone numbers, different last names, all the same gravelly voice when I called. The stain kept growing. Despite my efforts, it spread across more of the carpet each day, darker and more defined. When I pulled back the edges, the floorboards underneath were stained too, warped from moisture. Something had soaked through, something that wouldn't dry, wouldn't fade, wouldn't disappear no matter how hard I scrubbed. I sleep in the house now, but I never feel alone. The footsteps she wrote about in her journal echo through my dreams. The back door rattles in the wind, or maybe it's something else entirely. I've stopped answering when he calls, stopped letting repairmen into the house, but sometimes I see that crooked van parked across the street. The stain has reached the walls now, dark tendrils creeping up the baseboards like roots searching for light. I understand why she never left, why she stayed until the end. Some things follow you. Some stains can't be climbed, can't be hidden, can't be escaped. I found her camera yesterday, hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace. The memory card was full of photos, his van in her driveway, his shadow in her windows, his face pressed against her back door. And in the final photo, taken from inside her bedroom, I can see myself standing in her living room, scrubbing the stain that will never come out. The date stamp shows it was taken 3 days after she died. Story 10, The Enigma of Rebecca Thorne. She cleared the mist from the mirror, gazing at her reflection. Everything appeared normal, her face unchanged, her attire familiar. Yet a sense of unease crept in the longer she stared, a flicker in the corner of her eye, a subtle movement not of her own making. When she turned away, her reflection remained motionless, observing. This eerie incident marked the beginning of Rebecca Thorne's perplexing journey. What unfolded would baffle investigators and linger in the thoughts of a community for years to come. Rebecca resided alone in a modest apartment in a serene suburban locale. Known for her methodical nature and reserved demeanor, she maintained a cordial relationship with her neighbors while mostly keeping to herself. Working as a data analyst for a mid-sized company, her days were governed by routine and precision. Nothing hinted at her eventual role in one of the most enigmatic criminal investigations of the era. It all commenced with seemingly trivial occurrences. Objects in Rebecca's home were subtly shifted, no items missing, just rearranged. A cup placed on a different shelf, books shuffled, her toothbrush on the wrong side of the sink. Initially dismissed as mere lapses, attributed to long hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights, these oddities soon accumulated. Detective Marion Shaw received the initial report after Rebecca, experiencing weeks of disturbances, finally reached out to the authorities. The initial evaluation suggested a mental health concern rather than a criminal matter, a conclusion drawn due to the absence of concrete evidence. There was no tangible proof, Shaw later testified. No signs of forced entry, no missing possessions, just a woman plagued by a sense of unease in her own home. The pivotal moment arrived with the bathroom mirror incident. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca vividly recounted how her reflection seemed to move independently, how she felt a constant gaze even in solitude. This time, she had proof a security camera installed to monitor her front door. The footage unveiled a chilling revelation that sent shivers down even the most seasoned officers' spines. The grainy video depicted Rebecca leaving for work in the morning, followed, 20 minutes later, by someone identical to her using a key to enter the apartment. Forensic scrutiny found no signs of tampering or digital manipulation. The individual imitating Rebecca moved, dressed, and carried herself exactly like her, even possessing Rebecca's distinctive leather bag. However, Rebecca had already swiped into her workplace across town according to the time-stamped office security footage. "We are facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superiors. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can mimic her with uncanny precision." The investigation escalated, with fingerprints in the apartment exclusively matching Rebecca's, no foreign DNA uncovered, and neighbors reporting no unusual sightings apart from Rebecca's usual comings and goings. One neighbor, Mrs. Keller, recalled greeting Rebecca upon her return one evening and receiving no response, a departure from Rebecca's usual behavior, but not deemed alarming. As the disturbances escalated, Rebecca began documenting them meticulously. Minor alterations in her living space multiplied. Food vanished from her fridge, unfamiliar searches appeared on her computer, and unsettlingly, selfies resembling her surfaced on her phone, though she had no recollection of taking them. "I feel like I'm losing my mind," she confided to Detective Shaw during their subsequent meeting. "Or perhaps someone is orchestrating this to make me believe so." The breakthrough occurred when investigators discerned a pattern in the security footage. The doppelganger only surfaced when Rebecca was away attending specific engagements, such as therapy sessions, yoga classes, or Sunday morning grocery runs. "Someone is intimately familiar with your routine," Shaw elucidated. "This isn't random, it's a targeted surveillance and infiltration operation." A forensic psychologist speculated that they were dealing with a fixation case, a person fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, perhaps aiming to supplant her entirely. Though rare, such cases were documented in psychological literature, typically involving individuals who had experienced a psychological rupture and fixated on someone embodying traits they desired: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The focus narrowed when Rebecca mentioned a former colleague, Lily Winters, who had been dismissed due to escalating erratic behavior. Lily had worked closely with Rebecca, often remarking on their similarities. Post-dismissal, she sent Rebecca a series of disconcerting emails, one proclaiming, "We could be the same person. Sometimes I feel more like you than you do." With a warrant in hand, Detective Shaw led a search of Lily's residence. The discoveries within transformed the case from disquieting to chilling. One room in Lily's abode had been transformed into a shrine-like replication of Rebecca's bedroom, adorned with numerous images of Rebecca engaged in various activities, all captured without her knowledge. A closet held duplicates of Rebecca's wardrobe, alongside makeup matching her preferred brands and detailed notes on her mannerisms, speech patterns, and daily routines. Most alarming were the practice videos where Lily mimicked Rebecca's walk, gestures, and expressions. The progression from awkward mimicry to near-perfect replication was evident. "She desired to become me," whispered Rebecca as she viewed the evidence. "Not merely imitate, but erase me." Technicians uncovered sophisticated tools for key duplication and electronic access card replication, along with an intricate system tracking Rebecca's movements, including a meticulously maintained schedule predicting her whereabouts. However, Lily's ultimate intentions remained elusive. Journals discovered in her dwelling contained incoherent ramblings, alternating between first and third person and occasionally referring to Rebecca as me and her within the same entry. The final chilling notation read, "Soon, only one of us will prevail. The stronger version will endure." When authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished, leaving behind signs of a hurried escape: drawers ajar, some equipment missing. A nationwide alert was issued as Rebecca was placed in protective custody, relocated to a secure undisclosed location under constant surveillance. For 3 weeks, every location linked to her former life underwent monitoring, but Lily remained elusive. The case took its unsettling final twist when a security guard at Rebecca's previous workplace reported an anomaly. Rebecca had been sighted entering the building despite being on leave. Reviewing the security footage confirmed a figure identical to Rebecca had entered using a valid ID card, proceeded to her former desk, and spent 40 minutes sifting through her files before exiting. Meanwhile, the real Rebecca remained safeguarded in a fortified safe house, rendering her presence at the office impossible. The implications were stark. Lily hadn't fled, she had made her move. Assuming Rebecca's identity, she seamlessly slipped into her life while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains unsolved, with Lily Winters remaining at large. Rebecca Thorne chose not to return to her former existence, opting instead to forge a new identity in an undisclosed location. Detective Shaw keeps a photograph on her desk depicting two strikingly similar women, Rebecca Thorne and Lily Winters. Occasionally, she scrutinizes their features, seeking the nuances that differentiate one from the other. The most disquieting aspect Shaw imparts to new recruits is not resembling or sounding like someone else. It's the fervent desire to become another person, even at the cost of erasing oneself in the process. Our identity isn't just our outward facade, it's the core of our being, treasured until someone endeavors to usurp it. Story 11. In a quiet and mysterious world, there was a phone call that should never have happened. A pocket dial, a mere accident, yet within the static and muffled sounds, a voice emerged, cutting through the noise like a ghostly whisper in the night. A woman's frantic tones pierced the silence. He's here. And then nothing but eerie stillness. The operator hesitated, almost dismissing it as a glitch in the system, until the chilling words echoed in their mind. The number traced back to an empty house standing abandoned and forgotten for years. No signs of intrusion, no disturbances in the air. But in the dimly lit kitchen, a phone lay on the dusty counter, its screen softly glowing in the darkness. The call had been placed mere moments ago, yet the house seemed untouched by time. Detective Morgan Reed found herself captivated by the playback of the call, each repetition sending shivers down her spine. The whisper lingered in her thoughts, a haunting presence, desperate, terrified, and utterly impossible. The abandoned property had once belonged to the Sullivan family, until tragedy forced them to flee, leaving behind memories and secrets buried within the walls. As Morgan delved deeper into the enigma, a background check revealed a chilling truth. The number belonged to Catherine Sullivan, the deceased daughter of the family. She had perished in a car accident 3 long years ago, her voice now a spectral echo from beyond the grave. The evidence painted a perplexing picture. A phone, once owned by a woman long gone, making calls from a house frozen in time. The forensic team scoured the scene, uncovering no tangible leads. No fingerprints, no footprints, only a sense of eerie displacement where the phone had materialized. The heart of the investigation became those 11 seconds of sound, static, breathing, and 5 words spoken with a voice from the past. Analysis confirmed the voice as Catherine's, with an unsettling accuracy that defied logic. The timestamp of the call matched the moment of her tragic demise, down to the precise minute, weaving a tapestry of mystery and sorrow. Interviews with Catherine's loved ones unveiled a web of tangled emotions. Her father, bewildered by the ghostly call, her mother, haunted by the echoes of her daughter's fear. And Mark Jennings, Catherine's former beau, whose alibi crumbled under scrutiny, leaving shadows of doubt in his wake. But it was a discovery in Catherine's old journal that unraveled the truth hidden in the shadows. The journal spoke of love turned toxic, of fear and desperation escalating to a chilling climax. Mark's facade cracked under the weight of damning evidence, revealing a darkness that lurked beneath his charming exterior. A revelation buried deep in the earth, 20 feet from the site of Catherine's supposed accident, a buried phone, a silent witness to a heinous crime. Deleted texts painted a harrowing picture of a woman pursued, of a life cut short by betrayal and malice. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, exposing Mark's twisted games and the lives he had extinguished in the name of his own desires. A manhunt ensued, leading to a chilling showdown in the very house where Catherine's voice had once echoed in the darkness. Mark's confession unveiled a macabre truth. His attempts to silence Catherine had birthed a ghostly call, a haunting reminder of his sins. But justice prevailed, not through spectral whispers, but through the courage of those who refused to let the shadows of the past dictate their future. As the gavel fell, sealing Mark's fate, Catherine's mother clutched the journal close to her heart, a beacon of light in the darkness. The phone, now a relic of a haunting past, lay silent in the evidence locker, its ghostly echoes fading into the night. Catherine's story endures, not as a ghostly tale, but as a testament to the resilience of those who refuse to be silenced. In the stillness of the night, her voice lingers, a whisper of hope and justice in a world haunted by the shadows of the past. Story 12, in the heart of the city, stood a quaint coffee shop that held secrets as deep as the shadows that danced on its walls. For years, a mysterious man frequented the shop, his presence as consistent as the rising sun. His routine was unwavering: same table, same order, same silent contemplation. The barista recognized his face, a familiar stranger in the bustling cafe, yet his name remained a mystery whispered only by the wind. Then one ordinary day, the man failed to grace the shop with his enigmatic presence. Concerned, the authorities were called, and a peculiar discovery awaited them. Left behind on his habitual seat was a wallet, a lone sentinel abandoned in the sea of empty chairs. Within its confines, a driver's license bore a striking photo, but where a name should have resided, there was naught but a blank space, a void where identity should have thrived. Detective Sarah Mercer, a seeker of truths in the veil of mysteries, delved into the enigma that surrounded the man now known as John Doe. The security footage, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, revealed the man's mundane entrance and his inexplicable disappearance. A man of ordinary stature, clad in a navy coat and bearing a weathered messenger bag, he seemed like any other patron. Yet his vanishing act defied all logic, leaving behind a trail of questions that led nowhere. With furrowed brow, Mercer watched the footage repeatedly, searching for a clue, a hint that would unravel the puzzle. The man known as John Doe had entered, had sat, but had never departed. A phantom in the bustling cafe, a ghostly figure lost in the ebb and flow of time. The wallet, a treasure trove of emptiness, held only fragments of a life erased. Credit cards with no names, currency with no owner, a receipt marking time's passage, and a business card bearing a cryptic number, all pieces of a puzzle with no solution in sight. As Mercer delved deeper into the man's shadowy existence, she encountered a labyrinth of mysteries that defied reason. The notebook left behind, a tome of cryptic symbols and arcane scribblings, confounded even the most seasoned code breakers. Architectural sketches of buildings unknown to the city adorned its pages, whispering of a world beyond the visible. The mirror, an ancient artifact hanging in silent vigil, beckoned with its reflective gaze. Mercer, drawn to its enigmatic allure, uncovered a hidden chamber behind its ornate frame, a sanctuary of secrets concealed from prying eyes. Wallets identical to the one left behind, a journal chronicling decades of enigmatic experiments, and a final entry hinting at a reality beyond comprehension. The man known as John Doe, a phantom in the tapestry of existence, a traveler between worlds, existed at the nexus of an unfathomable experiment. His essence scattered across time and space, a fragment of a grand design that eluded mortal understanding. As Mercer pieced together the fragments of the puzzle, a revelation emerged from the shadows. The man who didn't exist, the enigma of the coffee shop, bore the name of Daniel Weston, a brilliant mind lost to the annals of time. A physicist who dared to breach the boundaries of reality, to dance on the precipice of the unknown. The building, a vessel of secrets buried beneath layers of history, stood as a testament to Weston's audacious pursuits. The laboratory where he vanished, the cafe built upon its hallowed ground, a convergence of past and present, of dreams and nightmares. And in the shattered remains of the mirror, Mercer glimpsed a truth that transcended mortal understanding. Two versions of the same man, reflected in the fractured glass, a duality that defied comprehension. The experiment complete, the window closed, a warning etched in fading ink. The case of the man who didn't exist lingered in the shadows of memory, a tale whispered in hushed tones by those who remembered. The coffee shop, a silent witness to a drama beyond mortal ken, closed its doors, its secrets buried beneath the rubble of time. Daniel Weston, the man who crossed realities, vanished into the mists of legend, his fate intertwined with the mysteries of the universe. And Detective Mercer, a seeker of truths in a world of shadows, found solace in the echoes of a story untold, in the whispers of a mirror that reflected more than mere images. Story 13. She entered through the front door, the dust dancing in the stagnant air. The abandoned house stood frozen in time, with peeling walls and furniture veiled in sheets. Each step felt like a journey into a forgotten moment, except for one peculiar detail: the doors. Every doorway she crossed led her back to the parlor. No matter which handle she turned, she always found herself back in the same room. The only escape seemed to be the entrance she came through. But as she turned to leave, the front door had vanished into thin air. The grim discovery of Morgan Pierce's body turned the old Victorian mansion from a mere curiosity to a crime scene. Detective Sarah Lynn stood at the threshold, observing forensic experts moving silently through the dimly lit rooms like specters. The house had garnered a reputation among the locals, a place where compasses spun aimlessly, where whispers of being watched lingered in the air. Now it held secrets far darker than mere urban legends. The initial examination suggests she's been deceased for approximately 3 days, the medical examiner murmured softly. The cause of death appears to be asphyxiation. Morgan was found seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her posture serene as if anticipating a guest. No signs of struggle, no marks of resistance. The scene exuded a haunting stillness that unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. Who discovered the body? Lind inquired, flipping through her notes. A real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers, her partner replied. They stumbled upon her sitting there, mistaking her for a trespasser until they drew closer. The house had remained deserted since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly 5 years ago. Legal disputes had left the property in a state of abandonment, unwanted, unsold, and mostly forgotten, except by mischief makers and thrill seekers. Morgan Pierce, a 26-year-old graduate student delving into architectural anomalies for her thesis, had a keen eye for the unconventional. Known for her meticulous nature, ambition, and fascination with spaces that defied traditional norms, the peculiarities of the abandoned Victorian must have beckoned to her. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days ago, Lind noted. Morgan mentioned visiting the house where people get lost for her research. The investigation unveiled Morgan's frequent visits to the house in the weeks leading up to her demise. Entries in her journal detailed strange acoustics, chilling patches, and doors that seemed to lead to different rooms each time they were opened. In her final notes, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to capture what she dubbed spatial inconsistencies, equipment that was nowhere to be found. During the autopsy, an unexpected revelation emerged: traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, derived from a plant used in shamanic rituals. While the substance could cause disorientation and vivid hallucinations, the quantities found were insufficient to be lethal. She wasn't a recreational drug user, her boyfriend insisted adamantly. Morgan was meticulous in her research practices. She wouldn't have jeopardized her perception knowingly. Digital investigations unearthed fragments of deleted messages on Morgan's phone, conversations with a kindred spirit who shared her fascination with the enigmatic house, someone who claimed to grasp its enigmas. The exchanges grew increasingly intimate and cryptic. The house retains its memories, one message hinted. It seeks someone to understand. The trail led detectives to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian who had engaged in correspondence with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena captivated her, and their professional rapport evolved into a more personal bond. When questioned, Reeves appeared genuinely shattered by her tragic end. "The house has a reputation," he disclosed. The original architect wove optical illusions and false perspectives into its design. It was meant to bewilder and disorient. Morgan believed there was more to it, something transcending mere tricks of construction. However, Reeves had a solid alibi for the presumed time of Morgan's demise. Surveillance footage placed him delivering a lecture at a university symposium miles away. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source: Alina Blackwood's grandson, now residing overseas. Contacted by investigators, he divulged a family secret veiled for generations. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to meet her end in that house," he revealed. "Others perished there. Always discovered in the parlor, always appearing at peace." The family termed it the claiming. He furnished investigators with journals spanning decades, chronicling deaths initially attributed to natural causes. The pattern was unmistakable. Those who spent considerable time within the house ultimately succumbed to what the family euphemistically labeled the influence. A subsequent sweep of the premises unveiled a concealed compartment behind the parlor's hearth. Within, investigators stumbled upon Morgan's missing equipment and something more. A small chamber harboring artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, arranged meticulously in a geometric formation. At the heart lay a carved figurine, its features worn smooth by generations of handling. Analysis identified the effigy as representing a deity associated with liminal spaces, thresholds between realms. Residue on the artifacts aligned with the alkaloid detected in Morgan's system. The case took a chilling turn when dust analyses within the house indicated another presence during Morgan's demise. Partial fingerprints divergent from Morgan's or any recognized visitors were lifted from doorknobs across the premises. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered lifeless in his apartment. Mirroring Morgan's fate, he was seated facing the entrance, wearing the same alkaloid in his system. Clutched in his hand was a key that matched no lock within his residence, but fitted seamlessly into the concealed compartment in the Victorian mansion. In his final correspondence, sent to himself as though preserving a testament, Reeves inscribed, "The house doesn't imprison you physically, it ensnares your perception." Morgan was correct. The doors lead to where they always have, yet something convinces you that you're retracing your steps. Once you grasp the verity, you can depart at any moment. But by then, you no longer desire to. The case remains officially unresolved, classified as suspicious deaths under scrutiny. The Victorian edifice has since been condemned, its access barricaded by authorities. However, whispers persist of lights flickering within on certain evenings and of visitors who vanish without a trace. Some locals assert that the house seizes those who delve too deeply into its mysteries. Others believe that Morgan and Reeves unearthed something ancient and potent, something residing within the interstices of conventional reality. The truth lingers as elusive as an exit in a house where every door circles back to the beginning. Story 14. In the quiet of the night, a mysterious package arrived in the mail, shrouded in secrecy within a plain envelope devoid of any return address. Within it lay a solitary brass key, its surface weathered by the passage of time. The homeowner, Sarah Miller, gazed upon the key, a sense of familiarity tugging at the edges of her consciousness. A peculiar unease settled upon her as she attempted to fit the key into every lock she possessed, only to find that none would yield to its touch. It was a key that did not belong to her, yet its presence seemed to whisper of a connection beyond her understanding. As Sarah placed the key gently upon the coffee table, a haunting sound filled the air. The old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime, its gears grinding to life despite having long been silenced by the hands of time. Bewildered by the inexplicable occurrence, Sarah felt compelled to report the strange events to the authorities, a ripple of disquiet stirring within her heart. The responding officer met with Sarah's tale of the enigmatic key, initially dismissed her concerns as mere happenstance, a key misplaced in the mail, a trivial error of delivery. However, Sarah's intuition refused to be silenced, a deep-seated feeling of wrongness gnawing at her soul. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, a seemingly insignificant token that would soon unveil a sinister truth lurking in the shadows of the suburban neighborhood. The case file eventually found its way to Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a keen sense for unraveling the threads of seemingly innocuous beginnings to reveal the dark tapestries that lay beneath. The brass key sat upon his desk, unassuming yet exuding an aura of disquiet that sent shivers down his spine. Delving into Sarah's background, the investigation yielded no hint of wrongdoing. She was a retired high school English teacher, a widow with children living far from home. Her life appeared as ordinary as the soft murmur of a summer breeze, devoid of any hint of malice or deceit. The forensic team's examination of the key uncovered only Sarah's fingerprints, the envelope offering no clues save for a nondescript postmark from a distant distribution center. The key itself, a common schlage, bore the marks of age and use, its origins shrouded in mystery. A breakthrough emerged when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique pattern through the department's database, unearthing a chilling link to a cold case from years past. The key's pattern matched that of a storage unit where unspeakable horrors had been discovered, an abyss of blood-stained carpets, tools of cutting, and haunting photographs of women unknown. The original investigation had hit a dead end, the perpetrator slipping through the cracks of justice. As Harmon pored over the dusty case files, a grim realization dawned. The key held the key to unlocking a Pandora's box of unspeakable crimes, the echoes of which reverberated through the shadows of the past. To be continued. Story 15. The gentle current whispered its lullaby that quiet morning, the water shimmering like liquid glass under the soft light of dawn. The lone fisherman, lost in his thoughts, almost missed the sight of a lone suitcase bobbing near the shore. At first glance, he mistook it for a pile of discarded garments, a mere afterthought left by the riverside. But as he ventured closer, a pungent odor assaulted his senses, thick, heavy, and undeniably ominous. The case was adorned with chains, its once sharp edges now corroded by time and exposure to the elements. When the authorities pried it open, they were met not by clothes, but by a haunting discovery. Inside lay a tangle of hair, fingers frozen in a macabre grip, and at the very bottom, a cryptic note that sent shivers down their spines. This isn't the first. Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the scene, a handkerchief pressed delicately against her nose to ward off the noxious scent. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s with dark locks and now pallid skin marred by the touch of the water, lay before her. The meticulous medical examiner diligently recorded each detail before the body was tenderly removed from the water's embrace. It wasn't the callous disposal that struck Mercer the most, but rather the eerie attention to the victim's appearance: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, clad in garments of luxury. "She was not murdered here," Mercer murmured softly, her gaze fixed on the muddy shoreline where the river gently caressed the earth. "She was arranged, deliberately presented." The victim was soon identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her dealings in high-end properties. Divorced, childless, she led a solitary life in an affluent neighborhood. Colleagues painted a portrait of a woman driven by ambition, meticulous in her ways and fiercely private. Her disappearance had raised alarm when she failed to show up for a crucial showing with affluent clients, an appointment she would never have neglected, her assistant insisted, knowing the potential windfall it carried. As investigators combed through Walsh's impeccably maintained modernist abode, a sense of eerie perfection hung in the air. Designer furniture stood like silent sentinels, every surface gleaming with sterile precision. The refrigerator housed neatly arranged meals, labeled and dated meticulously. Her wardrobe boasted an array of attire, color-coordinated, shoes nestled in protective casings. However, a single anomaly caught their attention: a slightly ajar drawer in her home office. Within nestled a weathered leather journal, its final entry sending chills down their spines. "He's watching again. Same car, different plates." A digital excavation of Walsh's email unveiled a troubling pattern: countless messages from unknown senders, all bearing the unsettling phrase, "I see your perfection," dispatched at precise intervals across various days. Her internet search history revealed a penchant for home security systems and self-defense tools. Mercer pieced together these fragments, intertwining the meticulous crime scene with the chilling puzzle unfolding before her. "Our perpetrator is methodical," she confided in her partner. "This was no crime of passion. It was a carefully orchestrated ritual." The pivotal breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. A local pawnshop owner recognized Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace among his wares, absent from her personal effects. The man who had pawned it bore a face familiar to the shopkeeper Michael Linden, an unassuming maintenance worker of few words. Surveillance footage unveiled a pattern of Linden's visits to Walsh's building, sometimes laden with his maintenance cart, other times devoid of it. Always during hours when she would be engaged elsewhere, showcasing properties to potential buyers. Upon scouring Linden's modest dwelling, investigators unearthed a chilling tableau: walls adorned with images of Walsh and other women, their likeness uncannily similar, captured without their awareness. Some portraits were ominously marred with crimson strikes. Walsh stood as the third victim in a line of unsuspecting prey. Behind a concealed panel in his closet lay a shrine of the macabre. Possessions belonging to each victim were meticulously arranged: a lock of hair, discarded tissues stained with lipstick, mundane receipts, keys to their lives. Each collection accompanied by a minutely detailed journal chronicling their routines, preferences, quirks. The interrogation room grew frigid as Linden was escorted in, his demeanor composed, his voice devoid of emotion. Confronted with the damning evidence, he finally broke his silence. "They were flawed," he murmured, his tone devoid of remorse. They projected an illusion of perfection, but I saw through their facade. Catherine's desk drawer was always in disarray. She missed a spot when applying her lipstick. Her perfection was a lie. The hunt for the predecessors alluded to in his cryptic note led authorities to desolate locales where two more suitcases surfaced. Within them lay women akin to Walsh in appearance, fellow real estate agents who touted their meticulous attention to detail as a badge of honor. At Lyndon's trial, he sat impassive, his countenance a mask of indifference as prosecutors unraveled his sinister methodology. Months of stalking, studying, and ultimately correcting what he perceived as imperfections in his victims, their hair coaxed into submission, makeup applied with precision, bodies draped in finery before extinguishing their lives. The families of the fallen watched in somber silence as the judge pronounced a sentence of life without parole upon Lyndon. For Detective Mercer, the case was deemed closed, yet shadows of uncertainty lingered. What inner demons drove Lyndon to fixate on these specific women? What shadows of imperfection haunted his own reflection, compelling him to enact his twisted rituals? As the river meandered downstream, its waters purged of all traces, a quiet unease lingered within the precinct. On Mercer's desk lay copies of those haunting journals, a grim reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy, darkness could fester. Sometimes the most perilous predators prowled in plain sight, biding their time, awaiting that solitary flaw to emerge from the shadows. Story 16, The Unseen Watcher. She never fancied venturing up there, but when the storm breached the roof, she had no option but to ascend into the attic. Dust-laden and draped in cobwebs, the attic housed a collection of forsaken items. Nestled in the distant corner sat an ancient dollhouse, intricately detailed with its minuscule furniture meticulously arranged. Yet as she gazed within, a knot twisted in her stomach. The figures within were not mere dolls, they were diminutive, hand-carved replicas of her kin. Each figure placed precisely where they had been seated downstairs, except for one. The figure meant to embody her stood by the attic entrance. Rebecca Morgan traced her finger along the dollhouse roof, sensing the impression where the tiny wooden figure stood. The revelation sent a shudder through her that surpassed the chill of the draft whispering through the rafters. The dollhouse had no place there at all. This wasn't her childhood abode, but a leased dwelling the family had recently relocated to. The saga commenced with Rebecca's agitated call to law enforcement. Officers descended upon the suburban domicile to encounter a distressed family, clustered in their living space, adamantly refusing to return upstairs. The lead investigator, Detective Sarah Harmon, initially dismissed their distress as an elaborate hoax or perhaps the fanciful musings of a family acclimating to an unfamiliar abode. The precision was what struck me, Detective Harmon would later reflect in interviews. Each minute figurine captured a distinctive trait of every family member: the father's receding hairline, the teen son's hoodie, even the faint birthmark on the mother's hand. The probe took a turn when forensic teams unearthed fingerprints on the dollhouse that bore no resemblance to any family members. More unsettling were the microscopic cameras concealed in the eyes of each miniature figure, all linked to a sophisticated recording system concealed beneath the dollhouse itself. Scrutiny of the Morgan family's activities over the preceding days unveiled a disconcerting pattern. The positions of the figures in the dollhouse not only mirrored the family's locations that evening, but precisely matched positions from different days, hinting that someone had surveilled them long enough to learn their routines. We soon realized this was no ordinary stalking case, elucidated Detective Harmon. The perpetrator exhibited an intensity of fixation seldom documented in criminal psychology. A concealed basement entrance was brought to light, hidden behind a false wall in the pantry. Inside, investigators stumbled upon a makeshift living quarter, replete with signs of someone having dwelt there before the Morgans. Discarded food wrappings, water vessels, and a sleeping sack suggested the interloper had resided beneath the family for weeks. Most confounding was the absence of forced entry. Property archives disclosed that the house had sat unoccupied for nearly a year before the Morgans' arrival. The previous proprietors, an elderly couple, had both passed away within months of each other. Their son had overseen the estate sale and subsequent rental of the property. Conversations with neighbors yielded scant information. While most had observed nothing amiss, one elderly lady mentioned sporadically glimpsing lights in the house during its vacancy. I presumed it was the real estate folks showing the property, she relayed to investigators. Never crossed my mind that someone might be squatting there without consent. A breakthrough emerged through digital forensics. Examination of the surveillance system connected to the miniature cameras disclosed that the data was being transmitted to an external server. The IP address guided investigators to a modest apartment across town. Inside, photographs of the Morgan family and prior inhabitants of the house adorned the walls. Diary entries chronicled the daily routines of each family member with unsettling precision. The most chilling discovery was a workspace housing numerous unfinished dollhouses, each representing different residences in the vicinity. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the former homeowners. His financial records unveiled mounting debts post his parents' demise. Rather than selling the house outright, he had fabricated the covert living space, persisting to reside there while earning rental income from unsuspecting tenants. The dollhouse served as his command center, expounded the forensic psychologist assigned to the case. Each figurine symbolized someone he observed. The figure of Rebecca beside the attic door wasn't a menace, it was his way of acknowledging her unearthing of his surveillance setup. During interrogation, Wells remained eerily composed as he expounded on his motives. They resided in my home, slumbered in my parents' chamber. I needed assurance they treated it with reverence. When probed about the positioned figures, he merely remarked, I wanted them to realize I was ever watchful. The psychological assessment unveiled a convoluted case of possessive delusion. Wells could not emotionally reconcile losing his childhood abode and devised an intricate system to retain dominion over it. The dollhouse metamorphosed into his medium of possessing both the property and its inhabitants. The Morgan family never revisited the house. Rebecca later recollected that the most haunting moment was not stumbling upon the dollhouse but comprehending its implications. Someone had monitored us all along, measuring our lives, reducing us to playthings. The true terror lay not in the dollhouse itself, but in realizing that in his perception, we were merely pawns to be arranged and observed. Wells faced multiple charges of stalking, invasion of privacy, illicit surveillance, and illegal entry. The case sparked a reassessment of real estate disclosure regulations concerning deaths on properties and the obligation of agents to ensure homes are vacated adequately before new occupants move in. During sentencing, the judge highlighted the extraordinary violation the Morgan family had endured. You didn't merely invade their residence, you encroached upon their sense of security and independence. You monitored their most intimate moments and replicated them for your gratification. What renders the case particularly disconcerting to criminologists is how long Wells could have persisted unnoticed had Rebecca not stumbled upon the dollhouse. Forensic scrutiny of his diaries suggested that he had clandestinely resided within homes for nearly 2 years, transitioning from one property to another, crafting dollhouses for each family under observation. The Morgan family eventually located a new abode far away, yet Rebecca confessed in victim impact statements that she still checks closets and hidden spaces routinely. She purged their new dwelling of all dollhouses and miniatures. "Some days I still sense a gaze upon me," she disclosed. "I wonder if somewhere, someone is still manipulating a diminutive version of me in a dollhouse I have yet to uncover." Story 17. In the old apartment, peculiar sounds echoed through the pipes and floorboards, creating a symphony of groans and creaks. However, the newest tenant, a young woman named Sarah, sensed a difference in the rhythm of the noises. The footsteps above her were too deliberate, too steady for a building settling into the night's embrace. They moved slowly, methodically, as if following an unseen path. Living on the top floor, Sarah couldn't fathom where the sound originated. One fateful night, she summoned her courage and tapped the ceiling with a broomstick. The footsteps ceased abruptly, leaving behind a palpable silence that stretched into the darkness. Then, in response to her knock, a single, eerie rap echoed from within the confines of the ceiling. Despite the unnerving encounter, Sarah kept the incident to herself, attributing it to the idiosyncrasies of an old building. She rationalized the persistent footsteps as mere echoes of the night, adapting by drowning them out with blaring television volumes and sleeping with headphones to shield herself from the unsettling cadence that traversed her ceiling in the shadows. Detective Morris stumbled upon the enigmatic apartment when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace while conducting routine repairs. During the repair of a water leak in the hallway adjacent to Sarah's unit, the worker removed a piece of drywall and unveiled a hidden passageway that defied the building's architectural blueprints. Illuminated by a flashlight, the narrow space revealed a makeshift living area with remnants of human presence, a clutter of food wrappers, water bottles, a tattered blanket, and a weathered notebook. Alarmed by the discovery, the building superintendent promptly alerted the authorities. Detective Morris, accompanied by his partner Detective Rivera, arrived at the scene to find the maintenance worker visibly shaken, muttering about a mysterious presence living within the walls and watching in silence. The notebook uncovered in the crawlspace contained meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman's daily routine, her interactions, her meals, her entertainment choices, and even intimate moments like her bathing and sleeping patterns. The handwriting transitioned from orderly to erratic, with cryptic symbols adorning the margins. The final entry cryptically stated, "The subject no longer responds to my signals. She has chosen to ignore me. No one ignores me." Forensic experts scoured the hidden passages within the walls and ceilings, unearthing fingerprints that yielded no matches in any database. Structural examinations revealed an elaborate network of interconnected tunnels dating back decades, linking 5 separate apartments but culminating in observation points disguised as innocuous fixtures within Sarah's residence. Interviews with current tenants yielded no peculiar experiences, but former occupants painted a sinister picture. 3 previous residents of Sarah's unit recounted feeling a pervasive sense of being surveilled or hearing inexplicable movements. One tenant had swiftly departed after a mere 2 weeks, while the others remained silent out of fear of sounding paranoid. The breakthrough in the investigation came with the discovery of minuscule blood traces within one of the crawl spaces. DNA analysis identified the blood as belonging to Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished mysteriously 4 years earlier. Martin had resided in the apartment directly below Sarah's, and his abrupt disappearance had confounded authorities. Delving deeper into Martin's case, Detective Morris unearthed a disturbing pattern. Martin had confronted his upstairs neighbor, a reclusive individual named Edward, about the unsettling noises emanating from above. Soon after, Martin vanished without a trace, and Edward vacated his unit, leaving no forwarding information. Tracing Edward's history of residence, investigators uncovered a consistent modus operandi. Edward had transiently inhabited top-floor apartments in various buildings over 2 decades, maintaining a low profile and departing without notice. Witnesses from his past residences described him as intense and fixated on silence, hinting at an unsettling obsession. Following Edward's property trail led the investigators to a secluded cabin adorned with surveillance materials. The walls were adorned with photographs and notes documenting residents from multiple apartment complexes, including Sarah and Martin. Detailed schematics of ventilation systems and structural vulnerabilities adorned the cabin, accompanied by journals chronicling the observation of specimens and the maintenance of the habitat. At the cabin's center, a corkboard displayed newspaper clippings of missing persons reports, 6 in total, corresponding to former occupants of buildings where Edward had resided. Deep gouges in the cabin's floor hinted at a grim ritual, suggesting repeated movements of a heavy object. Subsequent excavation behind the cabin unveiled a harrowing sight: multiple shallow graves containing human remains. As forensic specialists worked to identify the victims, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's building. Though the crawl spaces had been sealed, residents sporadically reported lingering noises, prompting further investigation. During the installation of enhanced security measures, maintenance personnel stumbled upon a chilling clue tucked into a crevice where the ceiling met the wall: a fresh notebook bearing a striking resemblance to the previous one. The initial page bore a chilling message: "They found my old nest, but not my new one." The notebook contained a crude sketch of Sarah's apartment layout, highlighting a new passage marked in crimson ink and a scheduled visit for that very night. Swiftly mobilizing, law enforcement officers rushed to evacuate Sarah, only to discover her unit deserted. Her phone lay forgotten on the kitchen counter, the television humming softly in the background and the shower running in a haunting silence. In the bathroom, a message materialized on the fogged mirror, etched by a phantom finger: "Look up." The ceiling panel above the shower had been removed, unveiling a hidden passage. The manhunt for Edward, revealed as Edward Mercer, a former construction worker with a penchant for architectural intricacies, remains ongoing. Thermal scans of Sarah's building yielded no indication of current occupancy within the walls, leaving a shroud of mystery around Sarah's fate. Linked to a string of disappearances across state lines, her case serves as a cautionary tale for property managers about unauthorized modifications in concealed spaces within residential structures. For Detective Morris, the lingering image that haunts his thoughts isn't the grisly graves or the detailed journals, it's the image of Sarah, ensnared in a web of surveillance, isolated in her apartment with phantom footsteps echoing above her. The chilling realization that someone had been listening, watching, and waiting in the shadows envelops his thoughts, prompting him to cast wary glances at his own ceiling in the solitude of his home, pondering who else might be listening in the stillness of the night. Story 18. In the heart of the city, the old library faced its fate of demolition. The workers, with their heavy machinery and determination, were nearing the end of their task when a serendipitous stumble revealed a hidden secret. A worker, sweat glistening on his brow, accidentally brushed against a bookshelf, triggering a soft click that echoed through the silence. With a gentle push, the entire bookcase swung open, unveiling a mysterious passage leading to a forgotten room. Within that hidden chamber, the air hung heavy and stagnant, as if time itself had decided to pause in that secluded space. There in the center stood a solitary chair, bolted firmly to the floor, its presence both eerie and unsettling, and etched repeatedly on the walls like a haunting echo of the past were the words, "I am still here." The construction foreman, sensing something amiss, quickly radioed for the authorities. What had begun as a routine demolition swiftly transformed into a tale of darkness and intrigue. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, arrived at the scene, his footsteps echoing in the dimly lit room. With a steady hand, Walsh directed the officers to secure the area, ensuring that no evidence was tampered with before the forensic team arrived. The history of the building whispered hints of a long-buried secret. Once owned by the illustrious Harrington family, the library had been a beacon of knowledge until tragedy struck. The disappearance of Rebecca Harrington, the family's beloved daughter, had cast a shadow over the community. Vanishing without a trace during her final year of college, Rebecca's absence had left a void that time had failed to heal. The prevailing belief was that she had chosen to vanish to escape a life she no longer wished to lead. But her family, haunted by unanswered questions, refused to accept such a simple explanation. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden room, they unearthed clues that painted a grim picture. Hair and fibers embedded in the chair, microscopic traces of blood and skin cells on the walls all pointed to a sinister truth. Someone had been held against their will, their struggle immortalized in the scratches that marred the walls. Detective Walsh, his intuition sharp as a blade, delved deeper into the enigma that surrounded the Harrington family. The timing of the library's donation, the secretive actions of Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle, all pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. The revelation that the DNA from the hidden room matched Rebecca's samples sent a chill down everyone's spine. It was a confirmation of a nightmare long buried, a truth too horrifying to fathom. Rebecca had not run away. She had been imprisoned, hidden from the world by those closest to her. The search of the Harrington estate unearthed a journal, its pages a damning testimony to Maxwell's obsession with his niece. His words, cold and calculating, detailed a plan gone awry, a desperate attempt to silence the one who threatened to expose his darkest secrets. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Maxwell's mask of indifference crumbled. The truth spilled from his lips, a confession of betrayal and murder that echoed through the chamber of shadows. Rebecca's fate, sealed by her uncle's hands, was finally brought to light. Excavation beneath the hidden room revealed a sorrowful sight. Rebecca's remains, clad in the silver bracelet her parents had given her, a poignant reminder of a life cut short. The Harrington family, torn asunder by grief and guilt, faced the reckoning of a past they had long sought to bury. As justice was served, the library stood as a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Flowers left at its entrance, a tribute to a soul lost and a memory preserved. And in the quiet stillness of that hidden room, Rebecca's whispered message, "I am still here," resonated, a solemn vow that her spirit would endure, her story told at last. Story 19. The apartment had sat still and silent for months, untouched by human presence. When the new tenants crossed its threshold, their expectations were low, a layer of dust, perhaps some abandoned relics left behind. But one door resisted their efforts. It stood firm, a barrier to what lay hidden within. A closet, secured from the inside, held its secrets tightly. With a final push, the landlord broke the seal, revealing not just forgotten belongings, but a haunting mystery. The walls bore witness to a struggle, etched with deep, erratic scratches that spoke of desperation. And in the shadows, an ancient flip phone lay silent, its screen illuminated by a single unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned in the ways of darkness, felt a shiver crawl down her spine at the sight before her. It wasn't the presence of blood or violence that unsettled her, but the silent screams of those scratch marks testimony to someone's captivity, their fight for freedom etched into the very fibers of the wood. "Bring in forensics immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured the chilling scene through his lens. "And gather all information on the previous tenants." The message on the phone glowed ominously. "I know what you did." The landlord, a man perpetually on edge, revealed that the previous tenant had vanished suddenly, leaving rent unpaid. "A quiet young woman kept to herself. Left half a year ago," he muttered nervously, avoiding the closet's gaze. "No trouble, no noise." Forensic analysis uncovered a grim truth within the scratches: traces of blood, mostly belonging to a single individual, presumably the missing tenant Emma Caldwell, aged 28, reported absent from her job after her unexplained disappearance. Yet among the familiar DNA, two samples stood out, one unidentified, the other belonging to a man supposedly deceased for 2 years. "This can't be right," Shaw mumbled, her gaze fixed on the perplexing findings. Emma's apartment whispered a tale of interrupted existence: unopened mail, a lonely coffee mug, a neatly arranged bed. Phone records hinted at a sudden silence in her regular calls to her sister, replaced by a flood of unknown numbers in the days leading up to her vanishing. The sister mentioned a mysterious boyfriend, Officer Reed shared. No name, just words like intense and private. Surveillance footage unveiled a shadowy figure trailing Emma into her building one fateful night, a man in a baseball cap, face averted from prying cameras. The pieces started to align when partial fingerprints belonging to Derek Mercer, a man presumed dead, were discovered on the closets in her doorknob. He staged his own death, Shaw concluded. But why, and what ties him to Emma? The unknown DNA led them to another missing soul, Lynette Porter, vanished 3 years prior, whose description matched a frequent visitor to Emma's abode. Tracking traffic cameras revealed a familiar car, registered to Derek Mercer's mother, circling Emma's residence, its driver resembling Derek's stature. The trail led to a secluded property owned by the Mercer family, where a grim discovery awaited. Behind fortified basement doors, Lynette Porter was found alive, yet emaciated, confined in conditions mirroring Emma's imprisonment. "He forced me to watch," she murmured, her eyes vacant with trauma. "Said I needed to learn the price of defiance." Clues piled up: journals detailing Mercer's fixation on dominance, photographs of women resembling Emma and Lynette, and damning video evidence of Mercer's monstrous acts. The hunt for Derek Mercer spanned regions, his dark desires sending chills through those seeking justice. A portrait emerged, painted by forensic psychologists, of a man not content with mere death, but reveling in the agony of his captives, savored in the confines of darkness. When Mercer was finally apprehended at a bus terminal, bearing a fresh identity and a one-way ticket to the coast, his bag held tools of dread: a roll of duct tape, a gleaming knife, and a newspaper clipping of Emma's disappearance. Under interrogation, Mercer exuded a chilling composure, claiming Emma had texted herself that ominous message, seeking a savior she believed she didn't merit. The trial unveiled the elaborate ruse Mercer had spun to evade justice, orchestrating his own demise and preying on women who mirrored his first victim. Emma's remains were never found. The evidence suggesting her final moments were spent in that unforgiving closet, clawing at walls that offered no escape. In a swift verdict rendered after 4 hours of deliberation, Mercer was condemned on all counts. As the judge sealed his fate with a life sentence devoid of parole, Mercer's lips curled into a faint smile, a private satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. At the sentencing, Lynette Porter's voice rang clear in the courtroom. He locked us in darkness because his own mind dwells in shadows, but as he rots in his cell, I'll bask in the light. The case reshaped procedures for missing persons inquiries, emphasizing the importance of relational patterns and thorough property investigations. Detective Shaw hung the closet door from Emma's apartment in her office, a solemn reminder that horrors lurk not only in bloodstains, but in the silent screams of those who fought to survive. Story 20. The forgotten box lay buried under layers of dust and memories in the attic of an old house, a relic left behind by previous occupants. Among the faded Polaroids of birthdays and gatherings, there was a photo that stood out. It depicted a family on a familiar couch in a familiar living room, yet they were strangers to her. Behind them, a shadowy figure lurked in the hallway, unnoticed by the smiling faces in the picture. As Rebecca examined the photograph, a shiver ran down her spine, and a sense of unease settled in her chest. Descending the creaking wooden stairs, Rebecca brought the photo to the harsh light of the kitchen, where she scrutinized the eerie similarities between her home and the unknown family captured in the image. Seeking answers, she called upon Detective Morgan, a seasoned investigator with a piercing gaze that seemed to pierce through the veil of mystery. Together, they delved into the history of the house, tracing back through the years of former occupants. The trail led to the Sutherland family, who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and an empty house. Forensic analysis of the photograph revealed unsettling details: the staged composition, the figure in the shadows, the sense of looming danger frozen in time. Each family that had lived in the house before Rebecca had met a similar fate, disappearing after precisely 1 year of residence. A chilling pattern emerged as Detective Morgan uncovered the dark history of the house's construction, linked to a man named Samuel Whitfield, who had seemingly met a tragic end long ago. Yet his presence lingered in the shadows of the house, his watchful gaze captured in the photographs that lined the walls of the hidden crawlspace in the attic. As the investigation deepened, the truth was unearthed beneath the concrete floor of the basement, a macabre discovery of preserved bodies, victims of a sinister plan orchestrated by a ghostly figure from the past. Rebecca, now a target of the unseen watcher, was forced to flee to safety as the haunting presence of Samuel Whitfield loomed closer. The house, now a crime scene frozen in time, whispered tales of unspeakable horrors that had unfolded within its walls. The mystery of Samuel Whitfield remained unresolved, his legacy of darkness casting a long shadow over the empty rooms. And in the silence of the night, as the Polaroid camera clicked and whirred, new faces appeared in the developing photographs, signaling that the cycle of secrets and shadows was far from over. The truth remained elusive, hidden in the darkness, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek it. Story 21. The town held its breath, never speaking of the house that lingered at the forest's edge. It stood silent and alone, its windows dark, its porch weighed down by the passage of time. No one laid claim to it, no one recalled its origins. But when a band of explorers strayed too near, they saw peculiar site names carved into the wooden walls, etched deep like ancient symbols. At the very bottom, fresh and untouched, was a name that sent shivers through them all. A name none could recognize until a whisper broke the silence. "That's mine." The call came in the dead of night. Dispatch logged it as a routine trespassing incident. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the leader of the group who stumbled upon his own name etched into the forsaken house. The responding officers expected mere mischief, teenage tomfoolery at best, but what awaited them defied logic. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as darkness draped the forest in its cloak. Her flashlight pierced the shadows, revealing the worn face of the building. The names 27 in total etched vertically along the eastern wall. Some faded with time, nearly lost to the wood's gray hue. Others remained sharp as if freshly carved. And at the end, Mason Wright, the cut still fragrant with the scent of fresh wood shavings. "I've never set foot here before," Mason declared, his words hanging like mist in the chilled air. "I can't fathom how my name came to be known." The inquiry kicked off with background checks on each listed name. The findings sent chills down the spines of the detective team. Every name belonged to an individual reported missing over the past 40 years. Some cases lay cold, others remained open. But all shared a haunting similarity: each person had vanished while hiking alone. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the depths, styles, and weathering patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, linked to a missing persons case from 37 years past. The files recounted a young woman who ventured into these very woods and never returned, leaving behind only a lone hiking boot by a babbling brook. Detective Keller delved deep into Mason's past, his story unwavering, his ties to the area non-existent beyond this fateful hike with his college comrades. They had chosen the trail at random, guided by an online suggestion. Nothing in Mason's background hinted at a connection to the other names adorning the wall. The focus shifted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, shared snapshots from their trek. Upon closer inspection, analysts spotted a disconcerting presence, a blurry figure lurking in the backdrop of 3 separate photos. A tall, slender silhouette, always half hidden by the trees. "We never saw another soul on our journey," Emily maintained. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller ordered a sweep of the house's interior. Though abandoned, dust blanketing every surface, furniture in disarray, the basement held a grim revelation. Personal effects of the missing hikers neatly arranged on wooden shelves: watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each tagged with a name from the exterior wall. Technicians meticulously cataloged every item, revealing hidden bloodstains under UV light, evidence of failed attempts to scrub them clean. Despite cadaver dogs' alerts near the dense forest at the property's rear, no bodies lay buried beneath the house. As the probe deepened, Mason began reporting strange incidents, anonymous whispers, fresh footprints leading to his door but not away, shadowy figures observing from afar. An officer was assigned to safeguard him, yet Mason's paranoia escalated. A breakthrough emerged with the unearthing of land records in county archives. The house belonged to a recluse named Victor Blackwood, a hunter who vanished without a trace 15 years prior, his disappearance largely overlooked. With a warrant secured, Detective Keller spearheaded an exploration of the surrounding woods. Within lay a network of crude hunting blinds strategically placed along popular paths. In one blind, a journal unveiled meticulous logs, observations of hikers, their routines, gear, and behaviors. The entries evolved from animal hunting tactics to chilling accounts of humans as prey, detailing how Blackwood selected his victims, stalked them, and claimed them. A manhunt ensued, spanning multiple jurisdictions. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scoured the forest, tactical teams combed every crevice. Yet Blackwood eluded capture. Mason vanished, his apartment deserted, a fresh incision on his bedroom wall reading, "The hunter becomes the hunted." Weeks passed with no sign of Mason. During a second sweep of Blackwood's house, a startling find emerged. Concealed behind a false wall in the basement, a workshop harbored woodworking tools, wood preservatives, and a newly carved piece bearing a name yet to be affixed. A name all too familiar to Detective Keller, the lead forensic technician, missing since calling in sick that morning. Authorities erected a vigilant watch around the house, cameras trained on every approach, motion sensors poised. The trap was set. 3 nights later, alarms sounded. Surveillance footage captured a figure emerging from the forest, unnaturally tall, eerily slender, moving with a haunting grace. As tactical units closed in, the cameras flickered, then steadied. The figure had vanished without a trace. To this day, the house remains under constant vigil. Mason and the technician were never found. The inquiry persists, resources redirected as similar vanishings plague other wooded realms. The names on the wall have become a whispered legend among investigators. Some officers shun them, others turn a blind eye. Local hikers steer clear, fearing that even mentioning the house may inscribe their names on that cursed list, the names unspoken. Story 22. The motel was a place of faded glamour, a relic of a bygone era where time seemed to stand still. Guests came and went, their stays fleeting and forgettable. The receptionist handed her the key with a cryptic gaze. "Just remember, avoid the last door on the left," he whispered, his voice tinged with a hint of mystery. Intrigue tugged at her, beckoning her towards that forbidden threshold. That night, bathed in the soft glow of flickering lights, she found herself standing before the ominous door. The metal handle sent a chill through her fingertips, and as she leaned in closer, she heard a faint, rhythmic breathing from the other side. In a different setting, Detective Morgan Reed roused from her slumber, entering the crime scene shrouded in shadows. The air was thick with the unmistakable scent of iron, a scent that spoke of tragedy. The room was a paradox order juxtaposed with chaos. A lifeless figure lay on the floor, her golden locks splayed like a halo, eyes fixed on eternity. Reed knelt by the victim, cautious not to disturb the grim tableau. "Third one this year," remarked the forensic expert, his voice devoid of emotion as he captured the scene with his camera. "Same signature as before," Reed nodded solemnly. The victim, adorned in elegant attire, seemed out of place in the dingy motel room. A designer purse lay open, untouched. This was no mere robbery, it was a crime driven by something deeper. The hotel manager lingered at a distance, his face etched with fear. "She checked in alone, paid in cash. I never imagined," his voice faltered. "The maid discovered her during routine cleaning." Reed surveyed the room, noting the absence of forced entry or signs of struggle. The victim had either welcomed her assailant or known them all too well. Back at the precinct, Reed pinned up photos of 3 women, all connected by tragedy in nondescript motels. Speculation swirled, whispers of a predator on the prowl. "Autopsy results are in," announced Detective Hayes, dropping a file on Reed's desk. "Manual strangulation, no DNA evidence, no signs of assault." Reed furrowed her brow. This was personal, a vendetta veiled in darkness. Days blurred as the investigation deepened. Surveillance footage yielded no answers, painting a picture of a victim, Elaine Werner, who seemed to have no enemies. Friends described her as cautious, meticulous qualities at odds with her choice of lodging. A breakthrough came during an interview with Werner's sister. She mentioned a man from work, the sister disclosed, hands trembling. "Secretive, complicated, married, I think," Reed lined in. "A name, just C," the sister whispered. The focus shifted to Werner's workplace. Colleagues painted a picture of a reserved professional with no hint of a personal life. Yet a business card hidden in her desk led Reed to Charles Emerson, a high-ranking executive. Emerson exuded charm and composure, but a flicker of unease passed over his features. "Did you know Elaine outside of work?" Reed inquired. Emerson's facade wavered imperceptibly. "Only professionally." Forensics linked Emerson to the crime through fingerprints on Werner's belongings. Denying involvement, Emerson's alibi crumbled under scrutiny. A trail of evidence led to his elaborate scheme luring women to motel rooms, recording their encounters and erasing all traces, including the women themselves. Emerson's facade shattered in the interrogation room. They threatened everything, he confessed. My reputation, my marriage. The trial unfolded swiftly, a spectacle of justice served cold. Families found closure as Emerson faced his fate, devoid of remorse. Reed locked eyes with him, sensing a void where compassion should reside. The media dubbed it the door on the left case, dissected by experts and armchair detectives alike. But for Reed, the case lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks behind closed doors. In the evidence vault, 3 keys lay dormant, symbols of lives extinguished. Reed, haunted by the echoes of motel hallways, pondered the secrets that lay hidden behind each door. Some doors, once opened, revealed a darkness that could never be contained. Story 23. The tale began with the new homeowners who brushed off the crackling of the old intercom system as a mere quirk, a remnant of the past, forgotten but still whispering in the night. It was a curious relic, rewired but holding secrets untold. One fateful night, the husband, driven by curiosity, pressed the button. A voice, faint and crackling, emerged from the speaker, posing a haunting question. "Why did you come back?" Startled, he recoiled, his hands trembling. His wife, standing behind him, denied ever uttering those words. The Victorian manor stood stoically amidst ancient oak trees, its aged facade concealing a modern interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker, drawn to its history, had acquired the property at a surprisingly reasonable price. The real estate agent, uneasy during the viewing, had hurriedly closed the deal. The intercom system, a charming feature linking all rooms, had captivated the Parkers, lovers of bygone eras. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the manor, her unmarked car gravel crunching under the tires. The call had been about a possible break-in, but a sense of mystery lingered in the dispatcher's voice. Daniel, visibly shaken, welcomed Detective Reeves, recounting the strange events that had unfolded. The static, the whispers, the unsettling sentences that had permeated their home, causing unease. In the dimly lit living room, Meredith clutched a mug, her expression tense. Without preamble, she revealed a startling discovery made behind a wall, a hidden compartment revealed by Daniel's renovation efforts. A worn leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age, divulged the harrowing tale of Alina, the previous owner. Her words penned in elegance and desperation, detailing her fears of her husband Vincent's malevolent intentions. The investigation unveiled the tragic truth behind the journal entries. Vincent and Alina Blackwood had once owned the manor. Records indicated Vincent had sold the property after Alina's disappearance, a disappearance that now seemed far more sinister. The team, led by Detective Reeves, delved deeper into the house's dark past. Beneath the garden shed, anomalies were detected. As the concrete gave way, revealing a grim secret buried for decades, a woman's skeleton, bearing signs of a violent end. A wedding band inscribed with "To Alina, my eternal love," provided a chilling link to the past. Vincent Blackwood's carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of evidence. In a stunning confession, Vincent revealed the extent of his deception. His wife's relentless voice through the intercom, a constant reminder of his crime, had driven him to silence her permanently. His meticulous charade of Alina's departure, maintained for years, had finally unraveled. Justice swiftly caught up with Vincent, his guilt undeniable. Daniel and Meredith, unable to shake the house's dark history, bid farewell, selling the manor to escape its haunting past. A memorial for Alina was held in the garden, a final tribute to the woman silenced for decades. The intercom system, a conduit for the truth, was removed by the new owners during renovations, ending its eerie whispers. As Detective Reeves closed the case file, she pondered the house's enigmatic power to reveal long-buried secrets. The justice system had prevailed, but it was Aliner's voice from beyond the grave that had led to Vincent's downfall. The manor, now stripped of its dark legacy, stood silent and somber, a witness to the past. Driving past the property, Detective Reeves would slow down, the window cracked open, as if listening for echoes of the past carried on the wind. The house, once a silent observer, had found its voice through the whispers that lingered in the air, a testament to the enduring power of the forgotten. Story 24. The aged envelope exuded a sense of history, its frayed edges tinged with a faded yellow hue, yet the stamp adorning it bore the freshness of recent postal service, hinting at a hidden urgency. With a delicate touch, the detective unfolded the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper within. The message typed on it appeared rushed, the characters unevenly imprinted. "I am sorry for what I did." As the paper was lifted, a dampness clung to the fingers, accompanied by a faint metallic scent that lingered in the air. It was only upon closer inspection that the telltale reddish smear along the bottom edge captured their attention. This was no ordinary ink stain. Detective Sarah Morgan, donning her protective gloves, carefully placed the letter into an evidence bag, her movements precise and methodical. The forensics team's analysis soon confirmed her suspicions the crimson stain was human blood, a match to the DNA profile from an unsolved homicide case that had long haunted the department. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had been discovered in her apartment, her body bearing multiple stab wounds. Her laptop was missing, her notes scattered, hinting at a possible connection between her murder and the story she had been diligently pursuing. Despite exhaustive efforts, the case had grown cold over time, with countless interviews and extensive investigations yielding no breakthroughs. Now a mysterious letter had made its way to the police department, simply addressed to the Homicide Division. The scant fingerprints found on the paper and envelope only hinted at the sender's elusive presence, their gloves leaving behind faint smudges. The postmark, however, offered a glimmer of hope, a tangible light after months of stagnation. Gathering her team in the dimly lit briefing room, adorned with a tapestry of crime scene photographs and investigative notes that led nowhere, Morgan affixed the image of the letter at the heart of the board. "This changes everything," she announced, her voice a hushed whisper that enveloped the room in a cloak of intrigue. "Our perpetrator harbors remorse." Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner since the case's inception, scrutinized the letter thoughtfully. "Or perhaps they wished to deceive us into believing so," he proposed. "The blood could be a theatrical ploy, a macabre game of taunting." As the investigation unfolded, tracing the unique typewriter impressions to a bygone model no longer in production, the team delved deeper into Rebecca's life. Her editor painted a portrait of a relentless journalist dedicated to uncovering corruption, her final assignment delving into a wealthy family entangled in local politics. With the patriarch's recent passing sparking familial discord over inheritance, suspicions ran high. Interviewing Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, revealed subtle shifts in his demeanor since the letter's emergence, furtive glances, trembling hands betraying an unspoken unease. Rebecca spoke of being followed, he confessed, his voice laden with regret. "I dismissed her fears as paranoia fueled by her investigation. I should have listened." As the detectives pursued this lead, a second letter materialized, bearing the same typewritten script and the chilling presence of blood. This time the message delved deeper. She unearthed too much about the family, about the inheritance, about the old man's demise. "I never intended for it to escalate this far." The trail led to the grand mansion of the deceased patriarch, where the eldest son, Richard, stood under scrutiny. His collection of antiques included vintage typewriters, and his responses to the detective's inquiries seemed rehearsed, glossed over with practiced ease. A breakthrough emerged when microscopic fibers on the envelopes were traced back to custom stationery used exclusively by the family's youngest daughter, Eleanor. Upon confrontation, Eleanor disclosed Richard's request to borrow her stationery, setting a chain of events in motion. A search of Richard's residence uncovered a concealed chamber harboring incriminating evidence, news clippings about Rebecca, surveillance materials, and a vintage typewriter mirroring the one employed for the letters. Blood analysis cemented the connection to Rebecca. The revelation of financial transactions between Richard and Michael prior to Rebecca's murder added a new layer to the unfolding narrative. Confronted with the evidence, Michael's fa-de crumbled. Rebecca had evidence of Richard poisoning his father to expedite his inheritance, he confessed, the weight of guilt evident in his words. I informed Richard of her discoveries, hoping to dissuade her. I never envisioned he would resort to murder. Eleanor's revelation of a damning recording, capturing Richard and Michael conspiring against Rebecca, solidified the case. Richard's voice, cold and calculated, sealed his fate. She must be silenced permanently. In a desperate bid to escape justice, Richard was apprehended. The prosecution meticulously built their case around the blood-stained letters, the antique typewriter, the financial trail, and Eleanor's damning evidence. Michael offered a plea deal, cooperated in exchange for leniency. Throughout the trial, Richard staunchly maintained his innocence, deflecting blame onto Michael, yet the overwhelming evidence spoke volumes. The jury's swift deliberation culminated in a resounding guilty verdict. As Richard was led away, shackled in defeat, Detective Morgan approached Rebecca's grieving parents in the courtroom. Though no words could heal their loss, the closure brought by justice offered a semblance of solace. The blood-soaked letters, relegated to evidence storage, stood as silent testaments to the unraveling of meticulously plotted crimes. The case of Rebecca Warren transcended its bounds, becoming a poignant lesson in detective lore, a reminder that in the realm of investigations, sometimes the most profound breakthroughs emerge not from advanced technology, but from the weight of guilt bearing down on a killer's conscience, embodied in the antiquated whispers of an old typewriter. Story 25. In the quiet anticipation of a new arrival, she decided to repaint the nursery, a space where faded memories lingered within the worn blue walls. With each stroke of white paint, a hidden message emerged, cryptic and unsettling. Don't let it hear you. Startled, she noticed tiny handprints imprinted in the fresh paint, too high for any child to reach. This discovery set off a chain of events that would become known as the Whispering House case. The young couple, unaware of the home's dark past, had bought the old Victorian house for a bargain. Detective Sarah Klein, with her notebook in hand, arrived to investigate. The pregnant woman, exhaustion evident in her eyes, recounted finding the eerie message and handprints. The previous owners had left abruptly, leaving behind a mystery that now consumed the expectant couple. Inside the historic home, Detective Klein traced the unsettling history back through time. The house had changed owners numerous times, each family staying briefly before departing under strange circumstances. Records revealed chilling accounts of children reporting whispers and unseen eyes watching them while they slept. Delving into the past, the detective uncovered the truth about Eleanor Blackwood, a widow who once ran an orphanage within the house. 5 children had vanished under her care, their fate shrouded in mystery until now. The house held secrets buried for decades, waiting to be unearthed. Forensic analysis and historical documents painted a grim picture, a circle of child-sized remains hidden beneath the basement floor. The children, long forgotten, had met a tragic end at the hands of Eleanor, who believed their innocence held a dark power she sought to harness. As the investigation unfolded, the nursery walls revealed a haunting truth: countless handprints glowing in the dark, a silent testament to the children's desperate pleas for help. The house, tainted by its past, exuded a presence that unsettled even the bravest souls. With justice served for the victims, the house stood empty, a chilling reminder of the horrors that had transpired within its walls. Despite efforts to erase the past, the whispers of the children lingered, a spectral echo of the tragedy that had unfolded there. In the end, the house succumbed to condemnation, a relic of a bygone era filled with unanswered questions and restless spirits. Detective Klein, haunted by the case, kept a photograph of the glowing handprints as a reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed, hidden beneath layers of time and paint. Story 26. The tale begins in a quaint town where the costume shop was in the final throes of closing its doors, a melancholic dance of selling off remnants of old inventory. Amidst the fading remnants of once vibrant costumes, a woman wandered in, her eyes drawn to a mask perched upon a dusty shelf. Its features, delicate yet unnervingly lifelike, seemed to beckon to her from behind a veil of forgotten tales. As she lifted the mask and placed it upon the worn wooden counter, the cashier's expression faltered, a flicker of uncertainty passing through his eyes. "That's not ours," he muttered, a hint of unease lacing his words. Perplexed, the woman glanced at the mask, searching for a clue. In vain. The tag was absent, leaving its origins shrouded in mystery. Without a second thought, she decided to take it home, a decision that would unravel a chain of events beyond her imagination. In the stillness of that night, a soft rustle stirred her from slumber, a whisper of fabric shifting through the shadows of her room. Startled, she reached for the comforting glow of her bedside lamp, only to find the mask perched upon her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that sent shivers cascading down her spine. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, would soon become a tragic figure in a narrative laced with darkness and enigma. It was her neighbor who stumbled upon the scene that would etch itself into the annals of mystery. The morning light spilled through the slightly ajar front door, illuminating the chilling tableau within Catherine's home. Motionless upon her bedroom floor, Catherine lay in a stillness that bespoke a silent terror. The mask that had haunted her now vanished without a trace. As Detective Morgan arrived at the scene, a symphony of hushed voices and clicking shutters enveloped the room, each sound a discordant note in the melancholy melody of the unsolved. Amidst the meticulous documentation of forensics, a single drawer left ajar, a lipstick-stained water glass, and the absence of forced entry painted a portrait of eerie normalcy disrupted by the absence of life. The medical examiner's somber pronouncement only deepened the veil of mystery shrouding Catherine's demise. Cause of death obscured by a veil of uncertainty, her frozen expression bore witness to a terror that had clawed its way into her very being, leaving behind a riddle that defied all logic. As the investigation unfurled its tendrils into the shadows of the past, a thread of interconnected tragedies emerged, each woven with the same macabre tapestry: a peculiar mask, a visage of terror, and a life extinguished in inexplicable fear. The echoes of similar deaths resonated through the annals of time, each victim ensnared in a web of dread spun by an unseen hand. A chance discovery of microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's grasp breathed life into the tendrils of the investigation. An enigmatic blend of human hair and an unidentified organic substance whispered of a presence beyond the realm of the known, a specter of malevolence that defied comprehension. It was in the faded pages of a hidden journal that the puzzle began to take shape, Catherine's words a haunting echo of her descent into the abyss of the unknown. Revelations of a mask that moved of its own volition, of ancient symbols hinting at a sinister ritual, painted a portrait of a malevolent force that transcended the bounds of mortal understanding. The retired detective's revelation, a whisper from the shadows of the past, unveiled a truth too dark to be contained within the confines of official records. The masks, vessels of a malevolent entity seeking new hosts, wove a tapestry of horror that spanned centuries, a cycle of death and transference that defied reason. As the investigation delved deeper into the heart of darkness, surveillance footage unveiled a chilling specter, a figure clad in Catherine's visage, yet twisted and distorted, moving with an unnatural grace that bespoke a puppeteer pulling invisible strings. The mask, a harbinger of doom, slipped through the fingers of the investigators, its sinister legacy poised to strike again in a dance of death and despair that transcended time and space. As the detective gazed upon Catherine's journal, a silent sentinel of the horrors that lurked in the shadows, a sense of unease settled upon her like a shroud. The mask, a silent sentinel of malevolence, awaited its next victim, its hunger for souls insatiable and unending. And as the night whispered its lullaby of darkness, the detective closed her eyes, knowing that somewhere out there, the mask watched and waited, its empty gaze fixed upon a world oblivious to the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil of sleep. Story 27. In the quiet stillness of the night, a wooden plank shifted beneath her weight, barely noticeable but enough to pique her curiosity. Slowly, she knelt down, her fingers tracing the edges of the loose board, sensing a hidden void beneath. The floor, once thought solid, now whispered of secrets waiting to be uncovered. With deliberate care, she lifted the boards, revealing a dark, narrow space that lay concealed beneath her new home. At first glance, only dust and cobwebs greeted her, but as her eyes adjusted to the dimness, shapes began to emerge: a mattress, a chair, and tucked away in a shadowed corner, a weathered notebook filled with a name repeated endlessly, her own name. Detective Morgan Reed stood silently behind Sarah Coleman, observing as she peered into the darkness below. The fear flickering in Sarah's eyes hinted at a deeper disturbance, a violation of sanctuary, a darkness that had intruded upon what should have been a fresh beginning. "Touch nothing," Detective Reed's voice was steady, a soothing presence amidst the eerie discovery. Clicking on her flashlight, she illuminated the hidden chamber, casting light on walls adorned with surveillance photographs, snapshots of Sarah's daily life, captured in secret, a shrine of obsession, carefully hidden beneath the floorboards. Sarah had purchased the quaint cottage from the estate of Walter Green, an elderly recluse who had passed away with no known kin. The property, vacant for months, had seemed inviting with its charm and promise of renovation. No hint of the sinister lay hidden during inspections or the sale. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah's voice trembled. "The neighbors spoke of his reclusiveness. I was told the basement was sealed off long ago. That's what the reports said." As crime scene investigators arrived, their equipment echoing against the wooden floors, they meticulously documented the hidden chamber, retrieving the mattress, chair, and notebook for further analysis. Forensic experts uncovered a myriad of fingerprints, all belonging to Walter Green, scattered throughout the clandestine space. The chilling realization came with the timeline pieced together by investigators. Walter had been surveilling Sarah for years, blending into her life unnoticed. He had shadowed her every move, woven himself into the fabric of her existence, all from the shadows beneath her very feet. This vexation, it escalates, the department psychologist mused during a briefing. From fantasy to preparation, the hidden chamber suggests a sinister intent. Detective Reed's investigation took a harrowing turn when she interviewed Walter's former coworker, a man who hesitated and fidgeted under her scrutiny. His admission hinted at Walter's obsession, his delusion of ownership over Sarah, a fixation that had taken root and grown unchecked. A key found in Walter's untouched locker led to a storage unit, a perfect replica of Sarah's former life, meticulously recreated by Walter. Furniture, belongings, even a mannequin in her likeness, all arranged with eerie precision. A calendar marked the date of a chilling event, a date that never came to pass. Walter's troubled past emerged. He had a history of fixation and delusion, a pattern that had lain dormant until Sarah unwittingly triggered his obsession. The man who had died of a heart attack had left behind a legacy of darkness, a tale of a twisted love that could have turned deadly. As Sarah chose to part ways with the house, a shadow of unease lingered. The final walkthrough brought no solace, only questions of what might have been if not for that one loose floorboard, that one moment of realization. The case closed with Walter's demise, labeled as stalking with intent to abduct, a fate narrowly escaped by Sarah. She moved away, a ghost in her own life, haunted by the specter of what could have been. The cottage passed to new owners, unaware of the hidden chamber sealed off, ignorant of the darkness that had lurked beneath the floor. Life moved on, but for those who knew the truth, the memory of the hidden room whispered of unseen dangers, of monsters